unmute us and externally for members of the public who wish to.
All right, so if we're good to go. Or are we live? Okay. Okay, it is 9:02 and I'm bringing this meeting to order of the airport committee meeting for July the 8th, 2021. Given that we have a couple, first we'll start with the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions to the agenda? None. Okay, Councillor Hoven.
I would like for the committee to add item 7.4 noise complaints.
Okay. And I would suggest we also consider adding 7.5 event process policy. Just a little quick background, just to consider kind of how we go through a process when events are coming to the commission. Any other additions? Seeing none, we're looking for someone to adopt the amended agenda.
I'll make the motion to adopt the agenda for July 8th meeting as amended.
Thank you. Those in favor? Mr. Wadden? I should maybe ask Mr. Kraus, did we have any indication from Ag and Forestry representative if they were going to attend?
Did you respond?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
And that's quite all right. Did we have any indication from the Ag Forestry representative if they were going to attend?
Let me take a look at the event RSVPs.
All right, thank you. Sorry, I just looked around the room and realized we were missing one group. While you're doing that, perhaps we can do a round of introductions. I'm going to start over with our far corner. That would be our newest member of our team at the county, Mr. Reed.
I don't believe I have a mic, but yeah, I'm Christopher Reed, the Chief Administrative Officer with Clearwater County. Happy to be at my first meeting.
All right. Ms. Budden.
I'm Laura, Communications Coordinator for the town and supporting the IT needs of this meeting.
Thank you.
Kyle Wadden, stakeholder representative for the Rocky Airport.
Dave Auld, Town Council.
Randy Brown, Town Councilor.
Cami Laird, County Reeve.
Tim Hoven, County Councilor.
Rob Shanks, Director of Engineering Operations.
Jim Murphy, Airport Supervisor.
Dean Kraus, Town CAO.
Marina Kulich, Executive Assistant and Recording Secretary for this committee. And Rick Moore indicated an acceptance of the invitation.
Oh, okay. I don't know if there's a way we could reach out to find out where he might be. Okay, thank you for that. Going around the room, we've got two delegations. Our first.
Vertical Extreme Fuels, fuel business owner at the airport.
Okay, and way at the back.
Neil Cook, President of the Alberta Aerobatics.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully we'll find out where our other member is from our commission. So we have two delegations this morning. So on item 3.1, we have Mr. Patrician with regard to the Vertical Extreme Inc. So I guess now that we've done some introductions, we'll let you begin unless we've got some admin lead in. Do we have any administration lead in for this? All right, thank you. Mr. Patrician, we're all ears.
Okay, I don't even know where to begin on this in some ways, first time for this. As the fuel holder at the airport,
Oops,
sorry, you're supposed to throw paper at me. Sorry.
it would be a paper airplane in there.
Good idea. I am the business owner owning the fuel station, and I have had an ongoing issue with my lease spanning just over a year. Starting off with a legal name change to the business. I think somewhere I read it was a change in business owners, but it was just a legal name change on the business. So I went from K2 Fuels to Vertical Extreme Fuels, just an amalgamation of businesses into one. That actually was quite easy, but ever since then, I do not know where the train has come off the tracks. I've been trying to deal with this lease through multi-persons, different levels, and it's just been problematic. So I'm here today to speak in terms of regards to getting my lease ratified, as it says for alternates to resolve the lease. How do we want to break these issues down, though? I guess I look to you for a lead on that one.
Okay, probably the best way forward is just let you walk through, I guess, the most recent lease and let us know where you've got some concerns, and we'll see what we can do. If I think that seems, does that seem appropriate to the rest of the,
Let's start there.
okay?
Okay, so
So
I
the-
know we have copy number 5 in your guys's stuff that you were presented in your package. I guess we could go there, and I've amended mine just to go through mine itemized. So starting at number A, and my point is on the lease, it has,
Just for a moment for clarity, that's page 64 is the beginning of lease, under attachment lease number 5.
okay. So through the 5 different iterations we've had in this lease over a year, there has been multiple different kind of names on the lease. It started off with the original lease I signed as saying the airport commission on that. The second lease went to the town and the county. The third lease went to is the town and the county. The fourth lease was to the town's name just on the lease. That is an item I will discuss at a later point. So the town's name was only on the lease, asked to be removed. So lease number 1 was originally signed when I took out this business. It was a lease that was largely dedicated to hangar ownership, not to a fueling business. The second lease is when we started through some form of reiterations to the lease. It was changing. The third lease was signed by me and witnessed by sorry, I'll get the lady's name. It was listed, witnessed by Rhonda in the, what is your office, Mr. Shanks? What's your office called? Engineering office. It was witnessed by her. And then it was presented to Mr. Kraus and refused to sign by Mr. Kraus. So lease number 1 I presented to the town was, sorry, Cami.
It's quite all right. Mr. Kraus, if there's going to be names, should this be an in-camera
Oh,
item?
sorry, I can remove names, sorry. What do you guys prefer?
No, I think we're fine to talk this in public.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah,
So
sir,
if we
I'll
could-
change that, thank you. So the town CEO refused to sign the lease for statement from town employee that the county's name was still on the lease.
Okay,
Okay, so after that, so each lease went through went through minor changes because it was dealing with hangar ownership and no admission of my fuel business. It had stated multiple things that there was not supposed to be fuel storage on the area. I was supposed to build a hangar within a certain time, which is regardless, it was just kind of a procedural thing that we signed what we had. And as we went along, I was working with a town employee to try to change the lease. During subsequent revisions, this lease, you know what, back up a bit. These topics are going to be discussed later on here. So my first question is I've had no direction to this. I do not know who to go to, whose name is supposed to be on the lease, as we've had the different revisions from that to the town and the county or the airport community to the town and county and just to the town. So how do I decide what is, and because I don't know where to go to.
Okay, so we've got the first question of whose name's going on the lease, but Councillor Brown.
Yeah, it seems a bit of a convoluted situation going there, but to me, it's fairly clear. The town is the managing partner for the airport. They should be the only one that is on the lease.
I guess I seen it slightly differently as co-owners. I would imagine we're both on the lease, but it would be managed through a process of administration through the managing partner.
I
Mr. Brown,
disagree, but perhaps Mr. Kraus can clarify for us.
Mr. Kraus.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so for clarification, and it should be both the town and the county on the lease because we're joint land use owners. The town actually never did take the county's name off the lease. The only lease that's in here that the county's name is removed was a lease prepared by Mr. Petition himself and his legal, which removed the county's name. So that was not a town action.
Okay, and thank you for that clarification. So to answer your question, Mr. Patrician, the town of Rocky Mountain House and Clearwater County would be who's on the lease. So I think we've got that solved. So that's yay, first thing.
So that one I'll discuss at a later date in terms of the removal of that. I have supporting documentation to that. I don't really want to go there. This lease has taken a process of over a year. This has not been an easy process. It has been one with much circular movement on it between multiple different peoples. All I've ever wanted was to result to one of the clauses on my lease of just a peaceable enjoyment of my business. And this just hasn't been that, to go through. I mean, we're talking hundreds of emails. This paper I have stacked on my desk is about 1/10 of what I've had. I've ran multiple different businesses in multiple different countries, and this has been the most difficult business I've ever had to run in a country where bribes and payouts aren't the norm like other countries I've had. This has just been absolutely painful. And this is starting off in a tone where all I want this is peaceful and easy, but now I've come to the point whereas I want the truth known on what it's been like to do business in this town.
Okay, well,
And so
Thank you.
I will address these points at a later date here. I come here dejected and sad that it's come to this. I've added hundreds of hours of my own time to document this to the point where I print and copy every single thing that I have for communication with everything about my business at the airport, every single conversation I have with every single phone call that deals with this business. I document the time, what was talked about in a book, make notes about what the conversation was about. And I've just felt I've had to dot and cross every I and T when it should be a peaceable agreement. And I will discuss some of the agreements that went well that got superseded by chain down the line. We have people within the hierarchy undoing deals that other people made, and this is what I want to bring to light. But I will go to point number 2.
so just, and I don't mean to interrupt, but Mr. Patrician, I think that we've got an opportunity here today to turn a corner.
Yes.
And thank you for sharing your previous frustration. But I think that we, again, have an opportunity to find you some resolution so you can have that peaceable moving forward opportunity. So I think we need to sort of focus in on how we can fix this lease. And thank you for sharing that. And it's good for us to understand. But I think we need to focus on how to get this lease done so you can cross that I or T and dot that I.
Yeah, I've been crossing eyes too. So I will go to point number 2 on my lease. It's going to number one, where the errors on the subsequent leases of everything that I've been presented have been numerous. I look at the point number two of the portion, the legal land description here. I don't know how you came up with that legal land description, but to me, it seems like one of numerous details that are inaccurate. Do you want a copy of the section and plot here, anyone?
Do you want a copy of a map that Mr. Patrician has?
Yeah, I'll take copies.
So anyone wants one.
Madam Chair, if I may interject,
Oh,
I
yes.
just wanted to provide an update on member Rick Moore.
Oh,
He
yes.
sends his regrets.
Okay, thank you. Oh, thank you. So this looks like it's a county map of the airport.
So the legal land description reads, the east quarter, which lies to the west of the line, draw parallel to the east boundary and perpendicular to a distant 402.3 meters. So here nor there, that's just a convoluted description that I don't even know if it needs to be on there, but and the way I interpret this map, maybe I'm missing something that's completely inaccurate.
Okay, from what I can tell, if we were looking at
So it says,
further on in
sorry,
the
Kenny.
package, we also have a lease agreement, and I get that's for hangars and whatnot, but we've got a descriptor there where all of kind of from a lease agreement that we have already approved. And that's page 136. And I don't mean to flip around a lot, but maybe we should just be following whatever that thing says. And it says Northwest 1147 west of the 5th Meridian LSD. Mr. Kraus?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That legal description is how is it described on the title for the airport?
Okay, so this wouldn't be the same?
When we redrafted this lease with new legal, this is the description of the airport proper on land titles.
Oh, okay. So that's how it reads on our title. Okay, so it sounds like that's the way it is on our title.
And if it's inaccurate, does that make it right, or what's the legal implication? My thing is it's overly complicated and it appears to be wrong. So even if it's on the title, two wrongs don't make a right. Does it need to be on my lease? So I don't know about the legal implications in terms of issues in the past. I mean, there's a fairly good description on following that described as that I think is very sufficient in describing this lease.
Any comments with regard to location? Are we comfortable with what's on title?
I'm comfortable with what's on title. We need to follow what legal requires.
Okay. And is there a need? It is accurate, Mr. Kraus?
Madam Chair, yes, it is accurate, and it's actually a moot point. I mean, all that description is just describing that the town and the county own this land, and further on, it's described as defines the lease portion within those lands.
Oh, okay, thank you. So I guess the described as is where we need to focus, Mr. Patrician. That would be on page. I'm not sure. I've got to look at the number here.
Page, well, I guess how he printed 2 of 8 on mine.
Flipping
It's just the subsequent line to
page
item number 1.
65. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I still believe it's wrong, and I if it doesn't hurt me, fine.
I
So-
don't believe it will.
Going to add to that to the, I don't know which page it is there, Miss Laird, but if we go to the back of this lease, there is a printed copy of what actually, it's an aerial view of what my lease actually entails, and with a perimeter line on it.
Oh, Schedule A on page 80.
Correct.
Okay.
So on Schedule A on page 80, there is a overhead aerial picture, which is of, in my opinion, very poor quality to represent what is actually on there. But if you look into subsequent paragraphs in the lease that describe certain things about that schedule. There's inaccuracies between the two. If you look at the measured square footage size wise, what they have depicted on there is larger than what they actually have they're billing me for. And I mean, just despite the quality of the image, it's actually factually wrong. They're stating that I have 22 square feet, 6.7 some odd meters by 22 some odd meters, which is 72 feet. There's differences in the numbering and the units that they've used in multiple different pages, but that's here nor there. That's just, I guess, omissions of clarity on that, but that square footage is actually wrong.
Okay.
And that ties into subsequent points down the line, which I want to make too as well, but I'll get to them then.
Mr. Wadden?
I think it's very important to determine the exact location of vertical extreme fuels because of the possibility of aircraft or other fuel spills or something on the airport or something of that, or containment, to make sure that it's defined where vertical extreme fuels is. And in case of further up actions with regards to a fuel containment or fuel cleanup or something like that, if a large aircraft or something or whatever has a fuel leak or something on the aircraft, so, or on the airport.
I'm not
Councillor
following the correlation between one and the other. Can you please maybe clarify on that?
Yeah. So I mean, what Kyle is asking for, what I understand is he wants an accurate defined area of his fuel location.
No,
right?
I get the two separate. I just don't see how they work together. And I'm just looking for clarification. I mean, the area is where the area is, and I don't see what relevance I don't see what relevance we know what the area is, we know where it is visually, we know where it is physically, but I guess you're getting my drift there, Mr. Patrician, go ahead.
So you say that you know where the area is, you know what it is physically, yet the clear description, they don't correlate. So to say you know what it is, if you have two figures that are wrong, that you don't say you know what it is. And I'm going to tie this into other points in terms of issues that I had and issues that I have in this lease that talk about snow removal. So if you're going to tell me that you know what the area is and what I have to manage as my property, yet you have contradictions to what I manage as being on your property.
I was simply asking for clarification, Mr. Patrician. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Mr. Kraus, perhaps you could provide us with some clarity.
So Madam Chair, simple solution, Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Petition could go out and actually stake the lease area, because that's never been done in the past. And then they can both agree on the lease area and we'll amend the lease accordingly. It's a pretty simple solution.
That's kind of what was going through my mind, is you could go to all four corners and GPS mark these things and then put it on a little map. I think, there seems to be enough things already this morning. Is there value? And I get how important it is to get this completed as soon as possible. Is there value, given this already, is there value in perhaps us tabling this? And I guess we can talk about that after, but we need to let you try to work your way through this. We recognize we've got a large agenda. So I guess if you can hit the highest points so we could then have further discussion, that might be helpful for us, because I sense there's quite a bit here that we're likely going to have you and Mr. Lindsay work on together and get it completed. So carry on, I guess, but just try to hit the high points if you can.
Yeah, and that's really what I wanted, is a proper procedure and policy of how I go about dealing with this. Who's my point of contact? Who's the decision maker? So if we can go through the high points and then have some cooperation with this in the future and it's easy, I'm very much
Okay.
acceptable of that.
I think we've got a way forward that should work. So perhaps just carry on with the high points. That would be great.
Okay, so to summarize that one, the square footage is wrong and ties it to other points.
Okay, it sounds like we've got a plan on how to solve that.
So go to the next point that I have that's a high point. It'll be item number 2 on lease number 5. is the duration of the lease being 5 years. To me, to invest a substantial amount of money into a business with 5 years and uncertainty past that, I'd like to see the durations increased. And whatever the policy and procedure is to look at that, because to have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars tied up into something where you have no certainty longer than 5 years is a little scary, in my opinion.
Okay, and I think we've heard that from other airport stakeholders as well. That's something I would look to Mr. Wadden to talk about later on.
Okay, so go to point number 3 on that lease, payment of rent and rent increases. There's a statement on there which I find a little bit disconcerting because I don't know if it has a clear definition. It reads, the tenant shall pay to the landlord the rent reserved, and here's the statement I'm talking about, and all other costs, charges, and expenses. Well, that's really no clear depiction. Like if you guys have to retain your counsel or something on this, am I liable for your bill? Or if something happens, I mean, I don't know, what are all different costs? What can be brought up into this? There's no definition. And to me, that leaves uncertainty in terms of fixed costs.
So Madam Chair, you just got to read that sentence for 3 more words, called for herein. So it has to be a cost that's identified in the lease.
Thank you for that clarity.
Okay, thank you. So we go to one of my biggest points. Sorry, we go to one of my biggest points here with this. I had brought this lease had come to me through multiple different reiterations through copy 1 through 5 now. Through these reiterations, we were trying to make a working lease, removing step by step, the stuff on the lease that was not pertinent to a fuel business. I know the CEO said last meeting that my business is quite unique and did require a unique lease. In the words of my lawyer, this lease seemed to be a patchwork quilt of things arranged, put together in a manner just to kind of accommodate my business, not with really clear direction. So in doing that, in your guys's minutes online, there is a sheet showing what my lawyer had changed and why. In statement number 4, use of premises, we added or changed a clause to F, or let me back that up here. It was added to talk about the use of my lease and access to my lease. I know in your guys's description there on your agenda, this lease, it added a clause that entitled right to the common airport property, including allowing vehicles to access the fueling station. See legislation portion that requires permission from the operator. So if you look at the clause that was added, in numerous points, it says the use and occupation of the premises by the tenant shall include non-inclusive license to use in common with others entitled thereto. And I mean with others, so that would be the public who would have access to those areas in their normal operations. And in the common lands, that's what they ended up defining it as. So if you go down to it, says subject to this lease and to exclusive control, management, and direction of the landlord. So it's not giving me free rein by that statement there. The landlord hereby grants to the tenant non-exclusive license during the substituting term and the renewal extension thereof in common with others. So multiple times it points out to the landlord having control of it. Now we're defining who the landlord is, I guess, with clause number 1 saying it's both the town and the county, but it's not saying that I have unbridled access to it. It's to be granted by the landlord. So I do not find that statement to be nefarious. And it really, if it was so bad, it transcribed from my copy, which the lawyer had re-edited, to copy number 5, which the town adopted too. But they made an addition going forward to that with statement number G. So they did add to it then, but to finish what I'm doing. So And it says, if any, on the land as the landlord from may time to time designate in writing for use of the tenant specifically licensed, entitled to access the premises by maintenance truck for the performance of performing maintenance and fuel delivery trucks for the performance of delivering fuel, as well as customers of the tenant who may fill their airplanes at the airport on the on-prem lease. Now, it's not talking about filling up anything other than airplanes. So it's not giving me lease to invite anyone onto the airport, but airplanes are really there that shouldn't be there. It's not saying that, you know, anyone can come and go as per my lease. And either way, that's here nor there. That's their right, is what they tried to decide. But it's given, you know, my lease to talk about maintenance and fuel trucks, which are very acceptable in my opinion, and airplanes. So that statement that was added or modified in this lease doesn't seem to be too worrisome to me. The landlord shall have right to alter the location, the size of the areas. Now, this is talking about the common areas sometimes, and that goes on to talk about parking spots and everything else. So I guess the common areas, I think from the definition of this is in my lawyer's notes, was just to be able to access the business. So somebody, you know, if this is a working agreement that's very peaceable, it's fine. But then what's to stop someone saying, hey, we do not give you access to the parking area, stay out of there. You can't get to your business that way, walk around the field or something. So it's given me right to access the common areas, the parking spots and everything else to be able to access my business, like freely use them as like the public would, in my opinion. And my big thing is too, is going back to some of the other questions is what channels do we have to discuss this? Some of the details that were made without discussion with me, and that going down to policy and procedure for me to address things. And once this lease is signed, I think all these things will go away, or once a lease is signed. So we go to clause G, which is what the town's lawyer counsel had added to kind of counteract.
Council.
Sorry, Mr. Patrician,
Councilor
sorry for
Brown.
interrupting. I just wanted clarification. So you said once a lease is signed, most of this or all of it should go away. So are you saying at this point in time, there is no signed lease?
There is no sign.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Go ahead.
Okay, let me clarify that too. I mean, it seems like there's a point that needs to be made there. So there was a signed lease. So once in June, the town had presented to me a lease. I signed a lease. The town had lost it with signed checks.
Oh,
Sorry, Tim.
Councillor Hoven.
June 2020 or June 2019? Or June 2021? When was this lease you just mentioned signed?
The first leases that were signed, I believe, were signed early on in 2020.
Okay,
So
thank you.
pretty much over a year ago to this date.
Thank you.
First copy was signed and lost, verified by town's personnel emails. Second copy, after some revisions were made, still unacceptable in one way, just wanted to get something working. Had always worked with the same lease. Second copies were signed and then subsequently lost after presented to the town. Third copy was signed by me, witnessed by a town official, and then refused for whatever reason by the town CEO. So there was a signed lease, 3 of them, but all of them,
Yeah, my question was simply is there a signed lease at this point? Thank you.
I more than answered it then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, time seems to have been a concern before. Maybe we should stick with that.
Yes, yeah, and thank you. We are recognizing that it is a long,
Yeah.
lengthy
mean-
agenda.
I've been dealing with this over a year. If I take 10 minutes, half an hour more, I just hoping to get as much ratified. I'm sorry if that inconveniences you.
Well, as the chair had mentioned, hitting the high points.
Yeah, that's a
And-
high point.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with your concern, or let's stick to the high points and what needs to be addressed and concerned, as opposed to telling us what works and what doesn't work in other aspects of the agreement. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Patrician.
So going into the high points of access to the airport, looking at clause number G, I look at the validity of that in numerous different ways. When it says I cannot invite, or I cannot have a fuel truck come onto the lease, I cannot have a maintenance truck come onto the lease, I cannot invite even a person to walk onto the airport. unless with written permission. So that to me seems too restrictive. High Point, we'll deal with that later, hopefully through subsequent meetings.
Actually, I have a question with regard to that. I noticed in G2, we indicate, I think that's CARS, Canadian Aviation Regulations 301.08. Maybe it's simple that we just follow CARS 301.08. And I don't know, maybe we don't need all of that. We just say that we follow that. Would that simplify things? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Wadden, this is for sure, you're much more knowledgeable about.
Yeah, I don't
this.
have 30108 in front of me, but I think it's very important that we remember that Vertical Fuels is an island on the airport. Okay, so we can't be restricting his ferry boats or his bridges or that kind of stuff. He needs unlimited access for fuel deliveries, for servicing, for emergency response. If he has a leak out there, he's got to be able to get to it. So it should be written in the lease that he has unlimited access to his business at all times.
Well, I imagine that there's some regulations that we need to follow for sure. And I guess that's where I was at. So as long as we've got some sort of process to make sure that we have access to the island and we're still following the regulations, there needs to be some way to achieve both goals. And I look to our new guy, Mr. Lindsay, to help us achieve that. So, Mr. Kraus, hopefully that seems like a reasonable way forward.
So Madam Chair, that's actually 7.1 on your agenda. It's vehicle access. I mean, all that is signing a form that you understand the regulations and you have the proper insurance and then it's signed off and away you go. I mean,
Okay,
it's a pretty simple procedure.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a documentation, and there's no requirement in the cars for insurance. So This
For
is-
the liability of the town and county,
okay,
documentation is always good.
all right.
correct, but document approval to get to your fuel business or to move around can be verbal, or it can be written in the lease. It doesn't have to be a separate.
So when we
so.
get to item 7.1, we can have a further discussion on that. But Mr. Patrician, I think the goal, at least for me, is to make sure, and I'm sure this committee and our managing partner is to make sure we get the most appropriate lease so you can do your business. And we can minimize liabilities as well, as will you want that. Please proceed.
So to quickly discuss that point is we had a very good, we had a very good working policy that could have been amended. So during this topic isn't new. This access thing, talking about this AVOP form, which wasn't approved or ratified, but the maintenance facilities manager and I came up with a policy that was shared, CC'd and emailed to a larger group and, approved that I would text him every time I would go onto the lease or a maintenance vehicle or a fuel truck would come. And he would respond with an appropriate no if necessary, but if I didn't receive a reply, it would generally be deemed as acceptable. And every time that I had to drive out there a fuel truck, I would just simply send a text and all was good. So that was a very good working policy at that time to deal with the policy. Now, hopefully we can develop something more. But I mean, this seemed to supersede all that. And it seemed to me just to increase problems, through multiple iterations of the lease, the problems just seem to increase, but we'll go forward from that one.
All right, thank you.
So I do want to bring this one up. So section 4G, item number 5, it says that only the airport supervisor or aerodrome manager is to allow access. I don't know if that's even actually functionally correct in terms of what the committee and policy is in between them. That's very acceptable to me if there's an agreement stating that we will have communication between them, but I don't think having the airport supervisor, he's the be all end all. Sorry to throw that man under a bus. He's new to the role, but I mean, that's not procedurally correct, I think.
Well, I think in the future discussions, there's opportunity for us to discuss it further in 7.1 as my
Yeah.
understanding.
So go to item number 5 on the lease. It's talking about fuel purchases. The issue that I have there is fuel flowage is at 5 cents a liter and taxable supposedly through subsequent iterations of the lease. In speaking with the town representative who was dealing with this, they said that they were Googling this stuff and to find out appropriate answers, whether fuel flow through subsequent emails longer in the past. Like when I bought this business, I was advised that fuel flowage fees were taxable. Now, it's not a small amount. It's just going due to right policy and procedure. I don't like to give extra money to the government if they don't deserve it. Sorry. But I mean, with having this town employee saying I Googled it and some people, so I checked a lot of the other airports around, half said yes, they pay GST on fuel flow, half said no. So I think that's probably an item that should be actually asked an appropriate tax attorney or maybe the CRA to sort that out.
I'm confident that the managing partner will do that. Mr. Kraus.
Madam Chair, so Ms. Quinlan, I mean, she didn't just Google it. I mean, she verified that it is GST applicable. You know, some that don't charge it, it might be included in the 5 cents, like GST inclusive, but in this lease, it's GST above the 5 cents.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So you said in this lease, but in subsequent versions, the last signed lease I had made no mention, signed lease I had made no mention of it being in there, but we'll discuss that later. And as far as the town representative saying that, I mean, I have a clear and very definitive email. I could read it to you if you want to, but as Mr. Brown had said, time sensitive, where she clearly states and she shows a clip off the internet saying where she Googled it. So.
Oh, okay, well, thank you, but I think we have a way forward, so I appreciate that clarity.
So going to item number 6 on lease number 5, it is dealing with fuel increases. So policy or section B on there, it talks about increases to the fees and everything. And the only question I have there is what is the discussion process to agree and disagree on that? So we will discuss that one later on. Item number 12 on that lease. This is a fairly large one to me. I think it goes into the Landlord Tenants Act. So that thing starts off saying the tenant shall permit the landlord to enter the premises and view the state of repair and the cleanliness of the premises. The tenant and the landlord may give the tenant written notice inquiring that the tenant to repair, blah, 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 going on from there. So it does not have any kind of clarity. Is that going to follow the letter of what the Landlord Tenant Act says? They have to give due notification, or can they just walk into my business at any time and do what they want at any area of my business? So I think that requires some clarification.
It sounds like a timeline of notice or something, so, okay, thank you.
Going down on that lease to item number 15. Talking with my insurance provider over the last little while. This is an item that's changed on multiple iterations of the lease. It went from it waffled in between different versions between $2 and $5 million liability insurance required. Talking with my insurance provider, if we go to $5 million of liability required, it goes to special underwriters, which significantly increases my premium. And from what the experts, which are my insurance providers and the underwriters, state that $2 million is a very satisfactory amount for a fixed fueling station. If it had been a fuel truck or something mobile, more would be required, because then you could run it into an airplane, whereas a fixed fueling tank's fairly stationary. If it hits an airplane, the airplane hit it, not vice versa. So I think that should be changed to $2 million, not 5, to deal with a substantial increase in premiums if it does go to 5.
All right, I appreciate that. I do note on page 140, when we look at the last liability thing, lease agreement, I mean, we have it as 2 million for like hangars and things. So that's something for our committee to discuss later on in 5.1. So we'll get an opportunity to discuss that at a later point here, Mr. Patrician. So
And that
thank you
did
for bringing it.
change it. Well, I mean, because I am a different business than them, but that did change from my versions, signed versions of the lease between 2 and 5.
All right, thank you.
Moving on, point number 18 on the lease. Now I really have to apologize for this one. This one to me is the biggest point of this lease, that the issue that I've had. It goes to peaceable enjoyment of this business. Can I maybe recommend that we go off camera for this one?
Is
Is that acceptable or?
Mr. Kraus, perhaps you could give us a little bit of guidance here with regard, I always am sensitive that if we have got a concern that we need to, recognize any need to
Madam
protect
Chair, I'm just,
people.
the question, is there anything wrong with the clause in the agreement as it is? And then what would be the point of discussing past events?
The point of discussion is to let known how this has actually gone, and hopefully to make it known to the hostile environment that I feel I have been working under, and reasons why here. And so if there's can be a peaceful agreement moving on that's easy through a set channel with cooperating entities, fine, but otherwise I want to make known what this stuff kind of entails.
Madam Chair, I mean, I got no issue with this. I mean, our past airport supervisor entered Mr. Petition's building. That was incorrect and that was taken care of. And there's been a change in manager or supervisor at the airport. And the airport supervisor has no reason to enter the building, your shack, and it won't occur again.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we've resolved it there. I understand it sounds like it's been a long year. I think that it's the managing partner has worked to resolve it the best they can at this point, and we have a new person in our supervisor to help us with a positive path forward. And I apologize that you've had a long go. I don't know that we want to go in camera, but I
No.
will look to my commission members
No,
in
we're
case
fine. Then if
they
we're not going to
do.
discuss it, I'm good. But I will bring up another point that's not here, nor what Mr. Kraus was mentioning. Peaceable enjoyment to me also entails having aspects of the working relationship between my business and the operations of the airport outside of my lease. So in the end of September last year, there was an electrical cable strike when they were doing some apron or some taxiway work. This electrical cable strike happened on September 30th. It took place and there were multiple people assessing the viability of my business, which happens to be a 75,000 liter fuel tank with an electrical cable attached to it, which they struck. At no point was I notified that this happened through multiple days. So there was a town employee that accessed my business to check the viability of it still up and running. I mean, fuel's flammable. It's tied to a residence hangar with multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars of airplanes in it, which could have been affected too. But so that happened on one day. I wasn't notified. It happened a second day where they came into my business to assess that if it was still operational a day later, and I was still not notified. And then a third day when I was at the airport, subsequent to that, I wasn't notified that it even happened. So 5 days later, I noticed on my security camera footage that this event happened, at which time I approached the town. Now, to me, that is just a very massive breakdown in what should be followed, that this could actually happen and I never be notified. And then some of the things that Mr. Kraus had alluded to were tied up into that. And I mean, yeah, very much different. So that I can move on from. So it wasn't only that point.
Okay, and thank you for clarifying. And it sounds like we've got opportunity for an improved relationship moving forward. Mr. Wadden?
Dean, can you just describe for us what section 18 is talking about there in that lease agreement? We can put that into layman terms for us, what they're trying to convey there.
Mr. Kraus?
Yep, so basically you pay your rent and you got full use and enjoyment of your property.
So I guess we have opportunity to learn in a positive way that, and I'm hearing you simply ask for notification if something were to occur in future.
A procedure of what I should be notified as it affects my business.
That might be an opportunity to have that discussion with our new airport supervisor.
So we'll move on to. So on the agenda that you had tabled here, it said that my lawyer had added a section due to snow removal. I know through the past airport committee meeting that the snow removal, and so I'm talking section number 19 of that lease, that the lease that my lawyer presented changed and talked about snow removal in a timely manner. That was addressed by your guys' subsequent agreement in that, but it also states section number A on number 19. It says, despite section 19, the tenant acknowledges that the tenant is responsible to clear the snow from the sidewalks and tanks near the premises. I think we discussed that as that sidewalk, as they're calling it, which sidewalk definition is greatly different than I think that what that is not actually on my lease as it's measured. And that section of the concrete there was a peaceable agreement that was done by the several airport managers ago to make an improvement to the airport. It was funded partially by the airport, however they did it, but of me out of good faith to improve the airport. I had donated a lot of time to cut, he had town officials or someone cut the concrete that was part of my original pad. We lowered it down to the apron height. We paved a few other sections, and we were, by the description of this item here, we were in the works of building 2 helipads on either side of the apron. There's a large pile of rebar, which I had purchased as my contribution to this. Despite being unnecessary for the functioning of my business, it's off my business lease. I said, yep, if I can help this, go ahead. It helps my business. So that saying that sidewalk is mine or whatever, when a town employee that's clearing snow is driving a multi-ton plow, that's one sweep of the blade. If we need to go that far, the snow removal was a constant issue throughout the winter. About discussing who was responsible for what, despite me only having a lease that stated I had 400 square feet, which is largely smaller than what I did, to reiteration number 3 or 4, 3, I believe, that the town had presented to me. So through copies, original 1, 2, it stated that I only had 400 square feet. And that's when the town representative who was tasked with modifying my lease actually changed the square footage, even though I was being pressed to clear snow that wasn't on anything that was my defined lease.
Oh, Mr. Kraus.
So Madam Chair, simple solution. So Mr. Lindsay will go out and stake that Mr. Petition will remove the sidewalk from the lease area because it actually extends quite a ways further away from the lease area. And the town will clear the snow as part of our operation. So done.
Sounds like a very reasonable way forward. Thank you.
Cooperation.
It does. It does. That's what we're looking for. So that's good. Then thank you, Mr. Kraus.
So moving on to item number 21 on the lease, 21A, the tenant shall be in default the tenant shall be in default in payment or rent or the amount of payable hereunder, whether lawfully demanded or not. That I have objection to that statement of saying whether lawfully demanded or not. Shouldn't anything be done in a proper legal manner?
As I guess I'm looking for, this sounds like legalese to me. Mr. Kraus.
Lawfully demanded through a court order or not as per the lease. So,
Thank you for that clarity. So we hope that we're not all doing everything through legal activities.
Sorry, that as per the lease is on there, or we're going to add that?
Oh, okay. Mr. Kraus?
Lawfully demanded or not. So, or not means through the lease.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I guess one of the last few points I'd make is timeline on this and channels that there's this. So this lease was largely done through town employees. I don't know if that's the proper channel. And after being presented with subsequent copies of the lease, I mean, I presented mine to the town CEO on December 23rd. And it was darn near the end of March where I got it back from their lawyers. So 3.5+ months later, I believe, before we actually got a signed copy through about 50 different emails I have printed on my desk saying that they would get a copy. So my big thing is, what is the proper channel to deal with things on this lease, whether it's the airport committee, certain officials, and then what is an effective timeline for this? What is an acceptable timeline for this stuff? Because 3.5 months to add 1.5 paragraphs to a lease to me was too stressful.
It appears that we've got a process for having we've got a new person to assist us. We have a process to try to get this done as quickly as possible. And I believe our intent is to see this resolved as soon as possible. I see no reason that we can't achieve that. And I guess what you're looking for is a timeline. I look to Mr. Kraus to tell me, you know, given that you've got to go out to the site, you have to mark it off, you have to do a few amendments to the agreement. What is seeming appropriate and reasonable? Mr. Kraus.
Madam Chair, I mean, I think it can be within a month. I mean, really going through this whole process, there's 3 changes to at least define the area. So that's Mr. Lindsay and Mr. Petition going out and staking it and measuring it. And then it's just changing some figures in the lease. Section 19.A, remove the snow removal on the sidewalk. That's hitting a delete button on a computer. So that's pretty quick. The other item that has come through this is the amount of insurance, and the commission will determine that today.
Yes. Well, it sounds like we're going to try to get this resolved in 1 month. So that would be good news for everybody. If you've got other things that you'd like to present so that we have that clarity, so we can achieve our 1 month goal.
The big thing is that I mean, sorry, I'm loud enough generally.
Here we
The
go.
big thing that I do want to state though, that easy, all I want going forward is a good cooperation with the people that I have to deal with. I know Mr. Shanks and I came to a very easy agreement with the snow removal. This is just an example I'm making. He said, this is childish. It's gone on long enough. This is how we're going to fix it, done. And then it was so easy after that. It became problematic when I received this copy of the lease. So all I want is easy. And I mean, everyone knows that any cooperation that you have that's easy is problem free. When things become issues with no proper channel of dealing with it, when it's convoluted on who you go to. So clarity on who I go to, we can discuss that lately, and hopefully moving forward, we can have just, you know, stick to the facts and figures in the legal, because this, I mean, a lease is a legal contract and that's how it should be worded indeed, and dealing with everyone with human kindness and compassion, because you want your businesses welcome and happy in the community. And I hope I can find that change going forward, and that's where it comes. So that's just my last statement.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions before Mr. Patrician leaves from the commission?
Oh,
Members?
actually, I do. Sorry, I do want to make one more point, Cammie.
Okay,
I'm thinking in terms. So I know with some of the direction, I want to speak to that. I think this is the for you, some of the direction of what's been happening on other avenues that directly affect my business in terms of talking that vehicle access permit for that, also talking about user groups of the airport. So we have had a very easily working airport in the past. If you look at what was happening last year compared to this year, it's drastically different. Last year, we had 3 helicopter companies sitting on the apron right next to my fuel tank. They had their working trailer over there. They had anywhere from 1 to 5 helicopters working under the same company there last year. This year, I've contacted them. They've chose to go elsewhere to another local airport because they deem some of the problems and the changes coming as too problematic. So last year, they had a fairly easy access to get onto the apron, drive with their working vehicle up to their helicopter, offload and unload everything. They had their working trailer there. At lunchtime, they'd come back. They'd have a barbecue some hamburgers, whatever. We also had a fixed wing airplane doing survey work in the area, who I subsequently talked to them. They don't know if they're going to be working this year, and through the grapevine, they said they may not come back. I mean, the flyer of that plane was an older gentleman, really wonderful fellow. He would walk over to that helicopter company at lunchtime, have barbecue hamburgers with them, have a Coke, and go about his business. They were very large contributors to the revenue of my business, largely because of the ease of this airport. Like they had no problem driving over to their trailer. I mean, they're all seasoned professionals. They know what to do. I mean, most people with a reasonable brain, know what to do if there's something in your way. Mr. Shanks and I had a conversation at one point too, like when there's a fuel truck on the airport, and he says, well, we're talking about, well, what would a plane do if a fuel truck's there? And I kind of explained to, well, what would you do if a fuel truck was sitting at the co-op? You would see that it's not moving and you would safely park by it or drive on by. And that's how easy it is to go and complicate things now with extra procedures at an airport of this size. To me, regards something. Also looking at the other user group of this airport, the largest user group of this airport, in my opinion, is the Aerobatic Club. Largely, I bought this business because I'm an aerobatic pilot. And sorry, Mr. Brown, I guess you find this funny, but if you look at my fuel sheets from the last month and a half, 80% of the movements on this airport are the Aerobatic Club. It's a deemed a slower year, but if you look at this sheet alone, there's 14 different movements on there. 8 of them are Aerobatic Club pilots of the 14. 2 of them, or one of them, is a fish or environment sustainable resources person who drove up with a pickup truck, filled up 2 barrels, and drove off into the bush wherever it is that they're going to work. And then one of them was a motorcyclist who walked onto the airport with gas cans, with multiple gas cans. So the largest user groups of this airport is what I'm trying to protect too, just to protect my business. Now that has been the corporate entity. I pulled the corporations that use my business having direct access. They all lead my numbers. Out of 128 corporate users of the airport, not one single one of them had any objection to the aerobatics there. So the only reason I'm stating this is to present in council, what I'm trying to protect is my assets. If I don't sell enough fuel to stay open and pay my bills, what am I doing this for?
Okay, and thank you for your closing summation. And we all want that goal of protecting this valuable facility in our community. We see it as an economic driver, and I think that's the goal we all have. We just want to make sure that we find an ease of cooperation that I'm quite confident we can achieve. And thank you very much for taking the time to come and provide us a very thorough, a review of your lease. Again, I apologize that it has taken us a bit of time. I think it's important that we get it right. So again, thank you for sharing all of that. I think what we'll do, given that we've been in the seats a little bit, I think we'll take a 5-minute break, and that way we can change out delegations. And I want to thank our other delegation for being so patient.
And
so
I just
you
want to
again.
thank you all for your time. I know this has been a lot of attention to this, and I just want to thank you for hearing me and your time and matter. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Kyle.
Why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Reeve Laird, everything is back live.
All right. Well, we are returning from a brief break in between delegations. We're so used to doing COVID spritzing and keeping everything safe. But welcome, Mr. Cook and Ms. Crane. I understand that you're going to provide us with an aerobatics presentation. We look forward to that. And I suspect that it'll be much briefer than the previous one, but that's quite all right. We move forward. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you for having us. Again, my name is Neil Cook. I'm the president of the Alberta Aerobatics Club. If you guys have, I don't know what page your presentation starts on.
82.
Yes.
82, thank you. So the first slide or second slide, I guess, is just a little bit about myself. As the president of the club, I do own a hangar at the Rocky Mountain House Airport. I do own a competition aerobatic aircraft that we practice regularly at the airport. We put on aerobatic competitions. We host coaching sessions and other events such as the upcoming Central Air Tour. We're helping volunteer and do a large part of the logistics coordination on the ground.
Hi, I'm Lenora Crane. I'm the president of Aerobatics Canada, the National Association. My husband owns half of an aerobatic airplane that he keeps at Rocky Mountain House and pays hangar rent up here. Last year, I spent 12 nights in the Tamarack because and I do a lot of shopping here because of our interest in aerobatics and being here. I'm a qualified flight instructor and an examiner. I worked for Transport Canada for 25 years, and I'm currently in the process of talking to one of the locals about setting up a flying school here. We're trying to see if we can make the possibilities work.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so we'll see. Getting airplanes is part of the biggest problem.
Yeah, so a lot of our members have a lot of great ideas from the operations of a flying school to soup and sandwich shop at the airport. We're a very creative group, and we're trying to drastically improve the morale at the airport and make it a great place that is welcoming to all aviation enthusiasts from all over Canada. So our main presentation goes through a lot of competition aerobatics. And then there's been a lot of questions around SFOCs lately. And Lenora is the technical expert in that, and I'll allow her to dive into the details there. So if you see slide four, the main types of aerobatics, there's instructional aerobatics, be it a flight school, recreational aerobatics, such as a guy up high somewhere far away doing a loop and roll competition, which is mainly what the Alberta Aerobatics Club is involved with, and then air shows, and a lot of our members are deep into the air show scene as well. I guess a question for the group, the picture of the lady there on the slide, does anybody know who that lady is? And the hints are at the bottom of the page. So she is in the National Aviation Hall of Fame.
I don't know.
Has anybody been to the airport and seen the trophy case that's with all the trophies in the terminal building?
I have.
So the lady there's name is Patty Wagstaff. In the aerobatic world, she is someone everybody looks up to. In 1986, she flew at an Alberta aerobatics competition and won the Unlimited trophy. Her stamp is on that trophy in that trophy case at the airport.
Wow.
Seriously. You're all welcome to go out and look at it. It's pretty cool.
I will double check. Thank you.
1986. So diving into slide 5, recreational aerobatics, as I talked about, this is somebody that's just doing aerobatics for the absolute enjoyment of doing aerobatics. It's not a judge sport. It is just for complete pleasure. They're usually way up in the air because there's nobody watching them. They're just in it for them. So no SFOC required. When you get into competitive aerobatics on slide 6, however, this is more what we're doing as an aerobatic club. So just to provide the context of what we're doing and why we're doing it at the airport, the biggest thing is because it is a sport and it is regarded as FAI, which goes into it being a world sport. So clarify that. for me.
So aerobatics technically is an Olympic sport, but it's one of those sports that doesn't get on the stage, isn't recognized in the summer and winter Olympics. It's one of the ones that can be added at any time. They're looking at putting soaring in right now as one. So as that, one of the subcommittees of the Olympics is the FAI, Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, which governs air sports. And so every 4 years, there is a world competition somewhere in the world. The last couple of years was like South Africa and Slovakia. So it makes it really hard for Canadians to get to it. And then one of the things that we're hoping to get support from the town of Rocky Mountain House and the MD is that in 2023, it was postponed a year because of COVID. There will be a world competition in Las Vegas, which is it. Finally, we have some place that's accessible for Canadians to go to because Canadians foot the bill for aerobatics 100% themselves. The French team, for example, are military pilots paid for by the government. They all fly military airplanes and the military takes them all over the world to contests. We aren't that lucky. We don't have huge sponsors like they do in the United States even. So in 2023, we have the chance of having the first and only full 8-person Canadian team go to a world event in Las Vegas. Out of the pilots in Canada that are capable of going to that, we have about a dozen. 7 of them live in Alberta and 4 of them keep airplanes at Rocky Mountain House. If they can't practice, we may not be able to field a team to the Olympics.
Okay.
So that goes into slide number 6 with competitive aerobatics and judging. So the reason that the aerobatic box is at the airport is to allow the critiquing of flights for aerobatic pilots and aerobatic judges. So the aerobatic box is about 150 to 250 meters from the judges. And the value that you get is when you're in the air and you can directly obtain feedback from the person on the ground critiquing you, that allows you to have the reference when you're in the aircraft to see the errors that you're making. So you need that direct feedback and correspondence with somebody on the ground to improve your flying skills. Any questions?
Nope.
So to facilitate that, the Alberta Aerobatics Club on slide 7 puts on a yearly judges school. So these judges are accredited. There's an examination that you go through. You have to do a minimum number of flights per year. And we would welcome anybody from council here, anybody that wants to become a member to come out and take the judging school. It's a great way to, immerse yourself in aviation. It's a great sport. And you get to watch some of the world's best pilots and examine their flying and tell them the errors that they're making. So there's 5 levels of competition aerobatics. So the 5 levels are primary, sportsman, intermediate, advanced, and unlimited. So on slide 9, pretty much all competitors do 3 different flights. So there's a known sequence. It's published yearly. Everybody practices it till they're sick of it. There's a free program that each pilot's allowed to make their own. There's a 2-inch thick rule book that you have to go through, but you can design your own program to suit your own flying style and your aircraft. And then there's an unknown, which you're handed the day before. You're not allowed to go and practice it. And you have to walk through it, I don't know, a lot of times on the ground, get it figured out in your head. And then you're sent up and you're judged on that without being able to practice it beforehand. And that's what really separates extremely experienced, qualified aerobatic pilots and those that are not as qualified and experienced. And then for the best of the best, it's somewhat like an air show. There is a 4-minute freestyle that's also can be included. Typically, we don't have that at the competitions that we host, but it is there.
Just before you move on much further, this offer for council members to take or participate in that judge school, when is it? And is there a fee?
We would keep the fee.
We'd waive the fee.
People would come out.
I just wanna make
We
sure.
haven't hosted it this year yet. I don't know if we're able to now that we didn't put it on this year because of the COVID challenges, and it's
It was,
much easier to do in person.
yeah, so the associate, the World Association put on an online one that most of us took because of COVID this year. And I don't think there wasn't a fee for that one. But generally, the fee that we charge is $20 for food. And, if we could get people interested to come out, we'd foot the bill for the $20.
Okay,
It's usually
once
just
you
cover
figure that
costs.
out, just send it to the managing partner and we'll ensure both councils get that invite. And that way they can actively participate if they choose to. So thank you for the invite.
You're welcome.
And generally, we run it in the springtime.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Oh, that might answer my question. Are they held on an as required basis or are they scheduled?
Generally, they're done prior to the aerobatic season. So they usually are running around the world anywhere from January till April. And but we run our judging school usually in March or April.
So the people that teach the judging school, they're internationals?
Yeah, they're
National.
internationally certified. So in Canada, we have 3 of us and I'm one.
So if there's a limited number of aerobatics pilots, there must be an even smaller contingent or cadre of instructors.
These are judges.
Judges.
Yeah, so coaches and like trainers of advanced aerobatic pilots, they're even fewer. So there's a couple of guys that the people in Rocky Mountain House have used in the past. And if you've been out there and heard the little Russian guy with his accent, that Sergey, whose name I can't pronounce his last name, and Nikolai are the two. And they were on the Russian team for many years. And like the Russian team was always one of those teams where they were military teams. It was their full-time job to be aerobatics pilots for their country, right? And those guys defected or left the USSR. I'm not sure what exactly their stories are, but they go around the world training world-class aerobatic pilots. And we've had a couple of them here to Rocky Mountain House over the years. Not last year, unfortunately, because of COVID, but they come and it's usually a 4-day workshop. And our top people in Alberta go to this workshop. One of the other guys from Manitoba has come as well to the coaching, and that is normally like a 4-day event and it's really intense with 4 or 5 pilots flying several times a day with a fellow on the ground giving them coaching. Otherwise, the coaching we give is to each other with judges and other pilots watching from the ground and saying, "You're not going straight."
So there's basically 2 ways to do it. There's the one way where we have the coach come to us, which benefits Rocky. We're putting them in a hotel, we're eating at restaurants every day. We're purchasing fuel at the airport. The other way I have done it, and sometimes you have to do it this way, is you fly into the States to obtain that same coaching down there. So it's not as beneficial. It's less cost for us. And it's mutually beneficial for the town and the county to have the coaching come to us at the airport. But the other way to do it is go into the US to do it, which is not as good for any of us. It's more expensive and it's not beneficial for anybody in Rocky or Clearwater County.
Oh, I appreciate that. And thank you for the extra clarification. And yeah, let's keep doing that here because that brings vibrancy to our airport and that's the goal.
So to dig into the lowest level of competition is primary. It's typically known as a loop and a roll, but competition mainly is broken into lines and looping and rotation figures. So as you see, number one is basically just a 45-degree up. So all the lines are either horizontal, vertical, or at 45 degrees. Figure number two is just an incipient spin, 1.5 turns, which puts you the opposite direction on number three, which is a half loop or 5/8 loop up and then half roll on the down line. So anyway, very, very basic. And the numbers there in the jargon, I guess you could call it, it's called Aresti. That's the type of, so in the Aresti book, it's long. Each figure has multiple components to it and a scoring system. You'll learn it all in judges school. So it's not super complicated. It sounds complicated when it comes fast at you like that. But that's what the pilot's reading in the aircraft. And that is what the judge, so the judge, there's a judge on the ground with a person that's reading this sequence and telling them what they should be seeing, and then a scriber, typically in a competition situation. So the scriber's writing down what the judge is saying, and the judge is listening to the person reading this figure. So that's how it all works. And we typically have 3 sets of those to come up with an average score, and then the high score wins.
Okay.
So three sets of
Push your button there.
3 sets of judges judging one pilot.
Correct.
Through-
In a competition
Right,
situation.
right,
Yep. So second lowest level is sportsman. So a little more complicated, a little bit more figures, as you see on slide 11. Box 4 is 1,500 feet. So under a competition where we have an SFOC for that, there would be fine there. I would say sportsman level and up should be starting to obtain their, you could practice sportsman and not have a personal SFOC. But my personal opinion is at that point and higher, you should be thinking about getting an SFOC for yourself. And I guess the other part with sportsman, that's when you kick into starting to have a free sequence. So the primary guys just fly the known typically 3 times. So the middle level is called intermediate. Box 4 moves down to 1,200 feet now. The one thing that intermediate incorporates now is what they call a flick maneuver. So you put the airplane under a high G load, and then you break the lift on one wing, which forces it to auto rotate. So, and the other thing with intermediate, this is when the unknown sequence kicks in. So my opinion is when you're starting to fly intermediate, my personal recommendation is you should have an SFOC at this point, because you should be practicing now down to 1,200 feet AGL. And you're at the point in your competency now where you're serious about the sport. So the second highest level now is advanced, and you can see stuff's getting a lot more complicated now. So the biggest thing with advanced is more figures, dramatically more complex figures. Your box 4 moves down to 656 feet. And you have a lot more, well, basically they start incorporating negative G figures. So anywhere on that slide where you see the dotted dashed red line is called a push, a negative G figure. So if you see, if you look at figure number 6, everybody found 6. So what the pilot would do is every figure starts at horizontal. You would pull to 45 degrees up, do 2 points of a quarter roll, which would now put you on your back. And then you push up and over the top, back to vertical down. And then you exit, well, you do a 2 of 8. So you got to do another quarter turn and 2 points and exit going cross box now. So this is only the second highest one, but it gets more complicated. So if you go to the unlimited level, which We do have pilots in the Alberta Aerobatics Club that do compete at unlimited and have competed on behalf of Canada at this level. This is the highest level of competitive aerobatics that you can do.
I was going to say that the only two pilots that have represented Canada in the last 20 years at a world event in this category keep their airplanes here, and Jersey
At Rocky.
lives here and owns a hangar here.
And
They're the
Dave
only
Barbett's in the
only
mix.
two pilots that have represented Canada in this event in the past 20 years.
I do believe he was the very first Rocky Mountaineer newspaper athlete of the month or week.
Ha,
was he not?
cool.
He was.
Yeah.
Yes. That's quite a bit of bragging rights for us. That's awesome.
So everything's more complicated in unlimited. It is the highest of the high. The block floor is the lowest of all the groups. So 328 feet now is what it comes down to. So 100 meters. You fly the 3 sequences as the majority of the other groups do. This is when the 4-minute freestyle can also come into play. But that's typically at like a national level or a world level is where they do the 4-minute freestyle. Questions?
Yeah, actually, I do have a question for you, Neil. These are very precise, intricate flight patterns here. I had no idea they were that complicated and interesting. There's only one aircraft in the air at a time when this is going on, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so this is not like there's a whole bunch of aircraft up there that are dogfighting and bombing around and all that kind
Absolutely
of
not.
stuff and everything. So
Yeah.
it's under very controlled environment and
Extremely controlled environment. You have to, there's a person on the ground that tells you to start, allows you to taxi. There's a chief judge. So after you do that and you take off, you typically go to a hold area that's been predetermined prior to the competition. The chief judge then will clear that airplane out of the hold area into the aerobatic box when the previous competitor is exited, while that previous competitor is then landing. So it's all coordinated, it's extremely safe, and the statistics of any kind of incidents or accidents is extremely low.
excellent, thanks.
So to now tie this all back into judging, if you go to slide 15, this is where, so it all looks complicated and it is, but the judging aspect and all the parts to every figure all has to be connected. So that 45 line, that simple line up, gets judged on if the aircraft is a couple degrees above 45 or a couple degrees below 45. If you look at the 4 airplanes with that X equals Y portion of it, if they have any looping sections on that 45 line, any rolling sections on that 45 line, if that roll is not in the middle, if it's too early or too late within that full 45-degree line, you get dock points for that. If you're going vertical up and you're dragging a wing slightly, you get dock points for that. If you do a hammerhead and you're not within a fuselage length of the aircraft, you get dock points for that. If the loop's not perfectly round, you get dock points. Like pilots can go into a complex figure and unlimited, and it all starts at 10 for points, and you can get yourselves down into the low single digits really fast if you're not extremely precise.
And that's Miss Crane who's busy judging you.
Very busy judging.
Oh, boy.
So yeah, lots of judges will count on their fingers as they dock marks from the pilots, because it is all happening that fast, and they're talking the whole time to the scribe that's supposed to be writing it down while they're listening to the caller telling them what they're supposed to be watching. It's really fun, but it's a very busy job, especially when you get to advanced and unlimited levels.
Hey.
So another complicated or more complicated figure, which I'm trying to do my best and work at, is rolling turns. So this is just another example where you can lose a lot of points really quickly. So to describe a rolling turn, so this one is 180-degree roller, 2 turns to the inside. So some can be you're rolling into the turn as you go. Some you can be rolling out of the turn. And sometimes they roll in and then out, just to make it complicated. But so the key points are that the judge is looking for, as it states here, level on the entry, consistent rate of turn, consistent roll rate. They're not climbing. Wings are vertical on the entry and exit, and there's no crabbing going on. So there's a lot of different parts, and that sequence is all broken down. And that's one relatively simple advanced or intermediate figure. So just to reconvey how complicated that these figures can get, how much precision is going into it, and why we need the box at the Rocky Mountain House Airport to allow that critiquing to happen, because they have to have somebody on the ground that's directly watching that flight to give the feedback.
Okay, so there's somebody there watching when these low-level aerobatics are going on.
I wouldn't say all the time, no, but to help the pilot and the judges advance, like pilots can definitely go up, practice on their own. You can tell some stuff by yourself, but if you want to advance in the sport quickly and not ingrain mistakes, it is better to have somebody on the ground.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
There still is value though by doing low-level aerobatics without somebody on the ground, because if you are not coming down to the level you're supposed to compete at, when you do come down to that level, then you put yourself in a dangerous position potentially. You need to practice at what you're going to perform at.
That's what I was just gonna say.
I was gonna say, my husband, for example, at the beginning of the year, he doesn't fly below 2,000 feet. He's up at altitude, practicing his figures, getting them down. And then after he's practiced for a while and built up a G tolerance and he's fairly confident that he's got the figures safely underway, right? Then he starts to move down into the box where he would then get somebody to watch him and coach him. So you don't see people down low level practicing something brand new and that they're not already confident that they can perform quite well. When they're down there, you're looking at making it a 7, go to an 8 or a 9, not a 1 to a 5 sort of thing.
Okay, thank you for that clarity.
And with that, I'll pass it off to Lenora to dive into SFOCs.
Alrighty. So the reason I wanted to talk about this, and I'm sorry, I've been a pilot for 45 years, and back in the day, we didn't have microphones and headsets in aircraft, and so I had to yell over engine noise. So I have calluses on my vocal cords. So when I talk for a long time, I start to lose my voice and cough. I do not have COVID. I've had both shots. So anyways, sometimes when the other reason, well, back again, reason I wanted to talk about this is there seems to be some misconceptions still out there about how the regulations are interpreted, and a lot of the correspondence has had incorrect misinterpretations of the regulations in them, as well as a misunderstanding of special flight operations. So it was my job for 25 years. I actually was the person who monitored the Rocky Mountain House Air Show for several years. It was my job to look after these regulations and enforce them. So if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Okay. So basically, sometimes companies need to conduct an operation or a pilot that's not allowed in the cars. And Mr. Wadden gets to do this when he slings people in his bucket. This is technically not allowed in the cars, but there are exemptions to the cars. You can do next one. So according to the Aeronautics Act, the minister can make exemptions to the cars. So you can either file for a one-time exemption, cost you $450, and if you get denied, you lose your $450. But the minister has deemed that there are some things that occur over and over and over again. So they've got some other cars that are really permanent exemptions to the main regulations. So CARS stands for Civil Aviation Regulation when I use that abbreviation. So keep going. So sections 603 and 623 are the sections that deal with special flight operations, which is where you find what we call the SFOC for low-level aerobatics. It's also where you find, keep going. So it would deal with air shows, aerobatic contests, balloon festivals and contests, parachute contests, drone operations. All of these things aren't in the main regulations. They're all under exemptions to be able to operate.
I believe we're on page 21 of the.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to jump in there.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about just?
Oh,
So just the picture there that's included here from Steinbach, Manitoba is a pilot that came all the way. So there is numerous pilots that came all the way from Steinbach, Manitoba. They brought, I don't remember how many flying students, multiple airplanes with students as well with them. They all stayed in hotels in Rocky Mountain House. And now they're starting up their own chapter for aerobatics out of Steinbach, Manitoba. So we do provide value to the aviation community. We are, I would like to say, somewhat ambassadors for the sport as well. And it is growing. So I think we're doing good things. And I think we have a lot of great things yet to still accomplish here.
alrighty. So back to SFOCs, other SFOCs. I have given an SFOC out to a helicopter to drop golf balls on a golf course so that kids could run out and pick them up and get the prizes for them. So all kinds of things get special one of SFOCs, but the aerobatic one is a more permanent one that's recognized in the cars, because rather than having your inspector issue a one of, they've made it into a special section of the cars. So one condition of all SFOCs, or all SFOCs have conditions. So SFOCs I issued for filming of movies so that they could fly low over towns and things like that. They would have specific things like qualifications of the pilots and, type of airplanes, things like that. You do a risk assessment and determine how can you mitigate the risks and allow this to happen if possible, right? They don't always get allowed to happen, but so one of the things of the SFOC for low-level aerobatics, one of the conditions is that you must have permission of the landowner or the airport manager in order to fly below 2,000 feet. Go for it.
Yeah, is that an or an and?
It's an or, I think. I'd have to look.
It's an or as it's written. It is
because
on the
it's an
slide there, Mr.
or.
Brown.
So what you're telling us is that if you have permission of the landowner, which in this case is just part of the box, you don't need permission from the,
Oh, no, in that case, you would need permission from both, because the area that you're over, you would need permission for, if you want to use this half of the box, you need the airports. And if you want to use that half of the box, you need the landowner. Okay, so they're more referring to, Neil's dad has a farm in Saskatchewan and he'd need his dad's permission to fly over dad's farm. Whereas if he's flying only over top of Rocky Mountain House Airport, it's only the airport. I think would be
Thank you.
the interpretation there. Okay, so that's one of the conditions. There are a few other conditions and they're all pretty standard. And I think in some of the correspondence, I've sent the staff instruction for that the transport inspectors use when they're issuing these out. It's available online if anybody wants to see it.
It's on slide 23, Mr. Brown, the direct.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Okay, so the aerobatics pilots who want to use the box have supplied their valid SFOCs. We have some of our pilots who got them in the early days of SFOCs. My husband, being an old guy, is one of them. Jersey is another one. They have SFOCs that don't expire, because originally when SFOCs were presented or given out, they had no expiry date. And in more recent years, Transport Canada, because there were a couple of idiots, there's always somebody who makes it bad for everybody else, did stupid things. They made them valid for only 2 years, but they didn't rescind the ones for the people who had them for life. And I've inquired about this and they're not going to. They'll let them ride until such time as the person decides not to use them.
Mr. Brown, Counselor Brown.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that going forward, there are no more
For life ones,
for life ones, okay?
2 years. 2 years.
2 years
is
is it?
2 years is the
Yeah.
standard
But,
now. Yeah.
but the
for-
4 life ones have
For
been
new, for
grandfathered.
new issues, yeah. So it creates a problem in the government if you have to rescind an aviation document. It allows the person to go to court and challenge why you're rescinding it and stuff. So I think Transport Canada, rather than try to reissue them and give everybody their day in court, has just said, nah, unless they cause us a problem, we'll just let them ride for a year. That's my guess at their reasoning, right? So, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so what have we been doing to enhance safety for use of the aerobatic practice area? So we have had 2 meetings now where we have basically read all our members the Riot Act, gone over all of the regulations, made sure that they are aware of them all, made sure that they're monitoring the mandatory frequency, not another frequency, that they are aware of and will be using correct circuit procedures, which I have a little bit of worry because from correspondence that I've read, I don't think that all of the recreational users of the airport are aware of the proper circuit procedures. And so I will volunteer at any time to give presentations on that to help to educate the other users of the airport, because people don't seem to be aware that this is not an uncontrolled airport. This is a mandatory frequency airport.
Well, thank you for that offer of volunteerism. Counselor Brown.
So when you recognize that there's a private pilot who's not following the prescribed circuit pattern, and so what's your required course of action then? Do you just keep it to yourself, or is there a
Oh, no.
process for identifying the pilot and the incident?
Okay, so as a non-Transport Canada inspector, because there would have been a difference, right? If I was a transport
Right.
inspector, I now have a duty to stop that pilot and give them an oral counseling. I can't give somebody an oral counseling officially now, but if they stopped at the airport or if they're listening on the radio, I would gently say, by the way, it's a right hand or it's a left hand circuit here, not a right hand circuit, or, and I would just talk to them if I did. If they created a hazard, then I would file a KDOR. And I can give you an example. I was still working for Transport Canada. It's about 7 years ago. And it was during our aerobatic contest, which was properly NOTAMed and everything. And my husband was actually the competitor that was flying. And he had to break off because someone came in, flew through the box, did aerobatics themselves, pull-ups and showing off in front of all the people on the ground, and then proceeded to come in and taxi up to the fuel tanks. I whipped out the badge, which looks like an FBI person, walked across the ramp, and as soon as they saw me, they started up and flew away. But by then I had their name and number. And so I went back to my office the next morning with the full intent of phoning him and giving him a warning. But when I looked him up in our system, he did not have a license.
Oh.
So I
Unbelievable.
then turned him over to enforcement. So the risks of, itinerant traffic not having licenses are way higher than the aerobatic club, I'll tell you, because our guys get checked for their licenses and their medicals in order to be at a competition.
To get the SFOC, we have to send them.
Yeah, and to get an SFOC, you have to have a valid license and a medical.
So this pilot had no medical,
No medical.
no pilot's license.
For at least 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and was, and proceeded to do stupid things. Like, if you're gonna fly around with no license, at least you should be incognito, right? But and there is quite a large percentage, unfortunately, of people out there in the recreational public who do violate the cars like that. And so as I said, softly warning, talking to them, it may be a student who's coming in from another school and they're maybe innocently ignorant, right? or it could be somebody who's a licensed pilot and doesn't care. And I've run into all of the above. And, you know, so someone who says, well, I can land head on with another. And we last year at our contest, we had someone take off directly head on to one of the aerobatic pilots who was on the radio. And it was a non-aerobatic pilot who was, you know, flying, just came in and was flying around doing circuits while we were running the contest. And he wasn't interfering until he decided that he was going to take off opposite direction from the landing aerobatic traffic. And the guy who was taking off opposite the aerobatic traffic was clearly in violation of the cars because the circuit pattern had been established
This happened last year.
at the
Oh.
contest.
So did we file a Cador?
I honestly don't know if John McFadden did or not.
Okay,
I don't think so because I haven't seen one for this airport come up. So,
okay.
yeah.
I'm looking to the new guy. and
In the
going, I'm
future,
pretty
it
sure
will
he's got
happen,
that.
right? Yeah. So
Well,
anyways,
The other
that's,
part to that is we want to be a good neighbor.
Yeah.
We're working hard to improve the morale that's at the airport currently, which I honestly would state is low. So we're doing our best to bring in all user groups to make sure it's a friendly environment. There was people watching us fly just on the weekend here. A guy and his kid was up from Calgary. They were taking video. The young boy is the same age as my boy. He has a YouTube channel. I put him in my plane, let him sit in it. He moved the stick and the rudder pedals. His dad videoed him. The kid's first name was Ty, super nice. He's coming back for the Central Air Tour here on Saturday. I invited them out to come and watch it. He was glowing, like he absolutely loved the experience. And we have that almost every single weekend. Somebody from the local community, this family was camping here at Crimson Lake. They were from Calgary. Just random people coming out to the airport, interested in aviation and want to watch us fly.
Well, that's wonderful to have great ambassadors for our community.
yeah. So I guess the bottom line here is that, you know, we will admit to have not been squeaky clean in the past, but we are making an effort to make it more than squeaky clean in the future for all of our members. And we will help the other guys too, if they need help.
Or would like it.
Well, we're all human beings, so thank you for that effort and
So, and just one other thing. So my husband and I took it upon ourselves to hire a mediator to, who is a local lady. You guys probably know Jan Gerke, and she's offered to work with us to talk to the groups, and we would offer her services to the user groups that want to talk about aerobatic policy. And we mostly hired her we want to get together with the Rocky Mountain House Flying Club and see what their issues are, and in a proper controlled meeting where there's a third party mediator who will help, you know, facilitate the meeting so that there isn't a whole lot of screaming and yelling and, you know, name calling going on.
productivity.
Yeah. So
Positive way to go,
positivity.
right? Like there's, you know, we don't seem to be making any headway, so we'd like to meet with them and try to find out, you know, can we iron out some of whatever issues they have with us?
So
The issues go both ways.
No.
We don't know. We've tried to ask, and all we get is, well, you know, and we don't know. Part of it is and I hate, you know, to say anything negative about past people, but we were not informed of any problems that were occurring as the aerobatic club until last September. Like we were blissfully ignorant, I have to say. And we wish that we had known that there were issues, you know, going on, because maybe we could have stopped some of it sooner.
Mr. Brown, could I ask for more clarification on your question about going both ways?
It seems to me that when there's problems, you always see the other person's side, but you don't see the problems with your own group.
Oh, could be.
You know, so essentially, if there's two people dancing, they both got to be involved in some respect, and I'm just,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe that is the case, I guess.
And,
So
yeah.
from the way we've tried to manage that, a large amount of our group has become members of the Rocky Mountain House Flying Club. They came to you and presented that as well in their delegation a while back. And honestly, they've renounced all of our memberships. We're now not allowed to be members of the Rocky Mountain House Flying Club. And our membership funds were just this week emailed back to us. So we like, Lenore and I are both from Calgary. We try to attend meetings. Meetings have not been held. Lenore and I both are, not terrible with computers. We try. We've offered to have Zoom meetings and host it, help them host the meetings to make it work. And yeah, just a couple weeks ago, we were told that the Rocky Mountain House Flying Club is returning all memberships, and we don't know if we'll be allowed to be members in the future or not. But that was our way to try to get together with that community that has voiced opposition to us and improve morale and have an open line of communication, because we're willing to drive all the way from Calgary monthly for a meeting. And it makes sense because we have hangers here, right? We do this weekly as being part of this community already.
Hence the mediator, maybe some third party level-headed negotiations or whatever can get us,
So
open up some of the issues. Maybe we can find out what we're doing wrong so that we can fix it.
how do you think they're going to view the fact that you selected the mediator and didn't involve them in the selection of a mediator, or even had a discussion with them about going through a mediation process?
Well, that's part of what the mediator does. She contacts them and to find out whether or what they think. And she will talk to like the interested parties individually. So yeah, maybe I didn't maybe I should have asked them if they wanted to do it, but
Mr. Brown, we've been trying very hard.
but we're trying.
No, I'm not, and I'm not disputing that. I'm just
Yeah,
saying that,
hopefully they won't look at it. I intentionally went looking in
Yeah.
Rocky Mountain House for a mediator, for someone who wasn't, I literally got her name out of the off the internet.
well, when you go local, you also get local politics, right?
Could
So,
be.
so all I'm suggesting is that we go through lots of mediation, and in every situation where we've had a mediation, requirement, we've jointly discussed the availability and selection of those mediators.
If you recommend to do
yeah.
that, we're fine discussing that.
If they want, I'm happy to discuss that and I'll change mediators if that's their desire.
So just
This
so
is
that we
just
don't get caught in this too much, I think that there is an opportunity with our managing partner and our new airport supervisor to assist in this process of being the middleman. And this, and I know Jen Gerke, and she is fantastic, but it is good to make sure that it's going to work out for all parties. And I commend you and your group for your efforts in finding the positive way forward and helping find a way to facilitate a conversation that is going to be productive for our vibrant airport to continue to be vibrant and grow. And I know that you've got this poster.
Yeah, so
Perhaps we should talk about that as well.
sure, we can. Yeah. We hired a professional graphic designer. We sent them all the information. They are involved in aviation, and they were able to build, with our help, an educational poster about the current procedures for the Rocky Mountain House Airport with aerobatics being involved, just to highlight, because it's not everywhere, right? This is a niche that you guys have at the airport that should be embraced. And because it is very good for the community and it does draw people in, right? So we simply built this poster to raise the awareness of that and to help educate local pilots of any kind coming into the community. Just that it is different. It's not common everywhere. But that's all. So Lenore and I drove up on Canada Day. We met Mr. Lindsay. He reviewed the poster. He caught one error in it. We're currently making that correction. So yeah, I think it's a good initiative that I don't see. And if there's policy changes or procedure changes, we'll simply make revisions and pay to make more posters.
Okay.
Simple.
I guess that brings us to the questions part of the PowerPoint. So Mr. Wadden.
I have a couple questions for both of you there, but I'll start with Lenora, if we're good. Lenora, you said you were with Transport Canada for 25 years. Could you give us a little bit of a background there, what you did for Transport Canada?
So I was a recreational aviation specialist for until the last 2 years when Transport Canada made us all generalists. So my job, I wrote and the SFOCs for air shows, monitored all the air shows. The last year I worked for Transport, I saw the snowbirds 13 times at various air shows. I looked after balloons, ultralights, drones, hang gliders, glider clubs. The government actually paid to give me a balloon license one year. So
were you a technical team lead at Transport Canada at any time?
on
during
and
the
off
Fires?
as an acting, we did 3-month rotations for several years. So I did the technical team lead work. So Susan Tombe, one of the ladies who was cited there, she worked for me for 3 months. I worked for her for 3 months.
So very, very well versed in the cars then, and obviously the FSOCs.
That particular part of the cars, I'm probably better versed in than most enforcement inspectors. They would come to me for advice on that. When that dude did his balloon, like cluster balloon at a Calgary Stampede, he had a whole bunch of little balloons on a launcher. It was me who got to write up all the regulations that he broke. Because generally, enforcement people come from an enforcement background. A lot of them are ex-RCMP. They're not specialists in those areas of the cars.
I also understand that in the past, Transport Canada has used the Rocky Airport and the Rocky Aerobatic competitions as training grounds for the Transport Canada inspectors and monitors that look after these special events.
Now, because there aren't a lot of aerobatic contests, this is where they get trained usually. If the Alberta inspectors, so we've had inspectors here for the aerobatic contests numerous times.
Yeah. So with the Transport Canada inspectors being here at the Rocky Aerobatics competitions and air shows, and the FSOCs actually being issued with Rocky Mountain House on the SFOC, then Transport Canada is well aware that aerobatics are being conducted below 2,000 feet here at the Rocky Airport for the last 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Plus a lot of our SFOCs that were personal were granted for this airport as well.
Correct. Okay. And so yeah, just to circle back, the SFOCs are determined in length if they're not expiry or grandfathered and location is specified on the SFOCs. Okay. And then the aerobatic SFOCs are different than the aerobatic competition FSOCs that are issued for an event, correct? Or an air show, correct? So we have SFOCs for individual pilots who are actually exempt from cars and given permission by Transport Canada to conduct aerobatics below 2,000 feet.
Yeah.
And then we have SFOCs that are issued for special aviation events, which are aerobatic competitions or air shows.
Yeah, and that's correct. And I probably should have talked about that earlier. So the event SFOC, when you're giving approval for an event, you're looking at the size and scope of the event. So for example, if you're running an air show where you're expected to have 5,000 to 10,000 people, then you're expected to have ambulances, you're expected to have fire trucks, you're expected to have, people like first aid people available in different stations and a much higher level. So it's all size and scope related. So an aerobatics contest where they don't invite people, we notify the local police and ambulance and fire that the event is going on, but that's all that Transport Canada requires, because Transport Canada is really interested in protecting a crowd, any people that come. And if you're inviting those people, you have to be responsible for them.
So a little bit of a correction there. We can invite people now. We used to not.
Yeah, we can invite people, but we don't. Because, yeah,
We have to manage them when they come.
yeah.
And you mentioned that you're considering opening up a flight school possibly in Rocky Mountain House. Is there any timeline on that there at all or anything?
Next summer was hope, but I was helping a school get started in Pinoca, and we've been working on it for a year now. Because
So-
it's just Transport Canada delays, right?
Yeah, so obviously with your experience and your background and knowing that aerobatics is being conducted at the airport here, you have no concerns about opening a flight school here as well with
No,
regards to the.
there's a flight school that runs in Bicycle with the skydivers all the time. I've run, flight schools in conjunction with glider clubs, with all multi-mix. I was the chief flight instructor of a flight school at a Calgary International for 2 or 3 years. And we, mixed in with all the big guys.
Yeah.
So, multiple uses of airports are not uncommon, and they just have to be managed by communication.
Right. I see in the presentation, it's quite interesting, the different levels and competitions and purposes of aerobatics. Every air show that I've ever been to, the air show aerobatic performers are performing right over top of the runway. And I do believe that we have some of those aerobatic air show performers here at Rocky Mountain House Airport. Therefore, for their routines and all that stuff, their SFOC allows them to practice overhead of the runway. Is that correct?
That depends on whether the airport allows them to. So airshow people have a double layer of safety. They not only have an SFOC, they also have what's called an ACE card. So when you start off as an airshow pilot, you're limited to 800 feet above ground, and you have to do a certain number of air shows. I don't know what the rules change periodically, but it used to be like you did 10 air shows and then you got to go down to 500, and you did 10 more air shows and you got to go down to 250, and 10 more air shows and you got to go down to the surface. So Ken Fowler was one of the people that the World Air Show Association certified to approve aerobatics acts, right? So when he was alive, there were people coming that needed to get certification from him. So he would watch them, and it would be usually you had to have Ken and somebody else. So usually were 2 aces that had to be consulted to get lower. So when you'd start off at 800, and move down, and you get evaluated at each layer to get moved down. And so you wouldn't be able to perform in the air show down to the ground until you've had the evaluation prior to, and then you would be able to do it. And your act is registered, and your act is specific. Your act is, you tell exactly what your act is, and then you do exactly that. You don't get to deviate from it. Okay.
So this is very, very structured, very controlled. This
Yeah,
is not a bunch of World War II barnstormers.
The
that are
air
out
show
here
guys
tearing
who
around
have
and,
surface, so they're running under both, right? They have an SFOC to practice, but they also have a restriction as to their altitude based on their ACE card. Okay, so Jersey, I know, for example, has a surface card. So he does that inverted ribbon cut at air shows, which is, flying down to the surface. And, he's been doing air shows long enough and, been evaluated enough times that he is allowed to do that.
Correct. Okay.
So whether or not he can practice here, that's now up to whether or not you want to allow him to use his SFOC where.
The other question that I have for you is, seeing how you both fly out of here and you're part of the Canadian Aerobatics Association and the Alberta Aerobatics Association. Do you guys feel safe flying here at the Rocky Airport?
There's been some challenges around that lately. Yeah. I guess honestly, the answer is no right now. We did have one member of the flying club come in making threats about shooting aircraft down. We did follow through with the police on that topic. We did not proceed with pressing charges on it. With the Central Air Tour coming up with that in light. Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Yeah, I just curious if you don't feel safe and you haven't felt safe, and I'm wondering why you would continue to stay at a place you don't feel safe.
Because we have the benefit that things are improving. So we are optimistic with the appointment of Mr. Lindsay that we're going to clear up some of these things. That people will come around to accepting aerobatics again at the airport. I think it is a vibrant part of the aviation community there. And I think the vast majority of aviators out of Rocky Mountain House do want us there. It's a very small minority of vocal people.
I'm glad to hear you feel that things will be improving. I certainly do. And look forward to having all groups work with Mr. Lindsay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
So, yeah, and I guess to further that point with the Central Air Tour coming, we've asked our members to put aircraft out on a static display. And we've had people turn us down on that request because of concerns of damaged aircraft.
Or aircraft?
Yeah,
tampering and
directly
stuff.
related to the 2 weeks ago gun threat.
Yeah.
Before that was the trigger. Before that, we were comfortable.
I guess when I hear that, was our managing partner informed?
I think we did talk about it or Mr. Lindsay and I did talk about it. So his recommendation was go to the police, which is exactly what we followed.
And immediately after I made the police report, I called Mr. Lindsay to let him know that I'd done it.
Okay, so it's being handled. And it shows that we've got,
It's in the proper hands of the RCMP. End of story.
and we've got our airport supervisor working diligently to have a positive way forward. So that's awesome. Mr. Wadden, I recognize, wow, I have no idea how we're
Sorry,
going to do
we're supposed to
this
be
amount
shorter,
of agenda in 45 minutes. But if you've got any additional questions.
No, just thank you for your presentation and your professionalism.
Welcome. Thank you.
I just have one question, and that's, do you want us to talk about, the minor issues we have with the aerobatics policy that was submitted or do you want us to wait until that comes up in case it gets postponed to another meeting or something?
So, Mr. Kraus.
Madam Chair, so, to put it in perspective, I drafted that policy. I am not an aviation person at all. I drafted that policy to get a discussion going. So
Perfect.
the idea behind that, as it comes up on the agenda, is a task force comes together, probably a small one, with representative from the aerobatics, a representative from Flying Club and Mr. Lindsay, sit down together, draft a policy that they think will work, send it out to all the leaseholders and stakeholders, get their input and bring it back for the committee.
Excellent.
We'd like to open it up a little bit, just more than that though, Mr. Kraus, please, to forestry, to have them have input in other local businesses that are at the airport as well, just so we have full
So
stakeholder
just to
representation.
clarify, just a small group to draft it, to send it out to all the stakeholders to have their input. So forestry would have their input.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
I see what you're saying.
So,
now.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, no, that sounds reasonable. I think that's the way, send it off to the committee and we'll discuss it there.
Okay, so we'll have to figure out a working group later on yet today. Thank you again for a very thorough presentation. This was different than the one I got at council for sure. There was a lot more detail. So thank you for that. I think we all have a keener understanding of what this Olympic sport level could be. And thank you for your interest in finding a positive and productive way forward to keep our airport both safe primarily and vibrant and growing.
Yeah,
So
and
thank
for
you
the
that.
competition coming up, that's going to be a request here for the September long weekend. We open the invitation to everybody to come out and watch that. And if you want, we'll ask you to be volunteers potentially for certain jobs as well, potentially. So have that as a bit of a caveat, but yeah, please come out and, you know, at least be spectators and potentially participants somehow as well. It's a really fun, good sport.
Okay,
Just before one other thing, sorry to keep you going here, and that's insurance. We have looked at, we also feel that 5 million is a little on the high side. 5 million is what you accepted for the last Rocky Mountain House Air Show, where you had over 5,000 people and all of the acts and zillions of cars and in-flying airplanes. And I see this kind of stuff happen regularly with people who aren't really aviation insurance brokers, who don't deal with it all the time. They don't know what to quote for. And like the person who's insured our aerobatic contests for the last 10 or 15 years is Nakora, a guy named Mitch Layton. And they have always felt that 1 million was enough and 2 million would be lots. So I do think that 5 million is, you're looking at like a major event kind of liability insurance, not for something where we don't invite spectators and have very few show up. And there's only one airplane, not even over the runway, flying at a time in a controlled environment.
okay. And thank you for providing that additional information for us to consider as we get further into the agenda. I'm kind of doing fingers crossed we can get it all done, which I highly doubt by noon,
Okay.
but
Well, we will get
anyway,
out of your
thank you
hair.
again. Thank you again for your very thorough presentation. Okay, that brings us to 4.1, which is adopting the last April the 8th meeting minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? Councillor Hoven.
There's a couple times where I'm referenced to as Reeve Hoven. It should actually be Counselor Hoven.
Oh, okay, that's on
So-
page 110.
Good catch, Tim.
Yes.
Our apologies, still must be in our software. It comes
Yeah.
up automatically, so.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other errors or omissions? If there are none, we're looking for somebody to adopt the meeting minutes as amended. Counselor Ald, those in favor? That is carried. So we have 5.1. Do we need to do any further discussion on the delegation from Mr. Patrician, Vertical Extreme Inc. I think we've got that sorted, and we certainly did give it a wholehearted effort there while we had him here. So, Mr. Counselor Brown.
Yeah, if there's no further discussion or questions, I'd like to put forth a motion that the committee accept delegation K2's Extreme Incorporated presentation as information.
Any questions? Seeing none, those in favor? That is carried. 5.2 takes us to the delegation aerobatics presentation from Mr. Cook and Ms. Crane. Do we have any further discussions with regard to that? I will say myself, I did very much appreciate the clarity around a number of items that I didn't fully understand, as I did from the previous Vertical Extreme one as well. So I think that was very much value added for me. Personally, hopefully everybody else found value in it. Is there questions or comments? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just want to thank both of our delegations as well for the information they provided. It definitely will help us going forward.
I absolutely believe so too. Absolutely. So with that, are there any action items that we need to worry about? If not, we're just looking for a motion from one of us to accept the delegation as information.
I would so move. We accept this information.
Councillor Hoven, any other questions? Seeing none, those in favor? That is carried as well. That brings us to 6.1, a low-level I always want to say it wrong, aerobatics policy. Perhaps we could get a lead in from Mr. Kraus or other managing partner staff.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So basically, so the committee has asked us to bring this back forward to the committee for consideration. So what administration is recommending is for the committee to establish a task force. Our recommendation is 1 member of the Flying Club and 1 member of the Aerobatics Club to work with our airport supervisor to draft a policy for consideration. We selected a low number on the task force just for the ease of time frame. And then that policy would be sent to all the stakeholders out at the airport for their input into a final draft. And that final draft would be brought back to the commission for consideration.
All right, do we feel that we've got all representation from, we heard a suggestion of ag forestry. I know we had an answer from administration that they'll get an opportunity to see it once it's further fleshed out by these 2 groups. Do we need any other stakeholders? I guess that's the one that I want to make sure that are those 2 the primary ones, they build it, we move on, and we're comfortable with that. Councillor Alt.
I think that's 100%. If we get it drafted in a short order, and then it can go back to everybody to have their opinion on it. But if we have too many people involved in it, it's going to take too much time. We're going to run into issues having the policy implemented, and therefore the aerobatics are not going to have the time they need. So I think if we can get it done in a short order, then we can get it approved by everybody.
Right. I guess I look to you, Mr. Wadden, as well. You represent the stakeholders.
Yeah, just so there's no confusion though, because at our last meeting, low-level aerobatics, for those that have a SFOC, can continue to do their training as required. And as this new process is massaged, then we go from there.
Okay, we can certainly seek that clarification from Mr. Kraus.
So Madam Chair, I mean, low-level aerobatics is occurring. One thing that has come to the attention of, and it's actually in the package, is that the town and county are not insured for low-level aerobatics at the airport. That is beyond the insurance that we contain right now. So what our insurance company is recommending that we get a proof of insurance for the pilots of low-level aerobatics and name the town and the county as an additional named insured for the practice of it. So it'd be my recommendation to the board to put that into a motion that we at least require that until the policy is developed.
Okay. Mr. Wadden.
Yeah, it will get some more clarification on that, because there's all sorts of low-level activities that take part at the airport. So what is your insured concerned that for low-level aerobatics, because the town has nothing to do with the airspace, the Transport Canada airspace above the airport, right? So what is the town worried about?
Okay, so it's not the town, it's our insurance company advising us.
Yeah.
So if the low-level aerobatics are being conducted over the airport, and that plane crashes, because it's our approval that they're doing it, into a hangar, we would be part of that liability.
I'm quickly looking for which page it is in our package, but we do have the note from
The insurance,
AU
130, Madam Chair.
130. Yes, it is. There it is. So there's literally what has been provided to the managing partner, the town, on behalf of both owners on insurance recommendations. I know that one of our delegations provided us a little bit of information. Ms. Crane provided us some information about that as well. So I think that we'll have more conversation when we get to, I guess that is part of this story. Thank you. So that's kind of what is generating this conversation.
Okay, so what does your insurance underwriter say if a helicopter, an air tanker, or general aviation aircraft crashes into a hangar? What's the
Yeah,
difference?
so the response we got from them, that's the typical use of an airport. So when we insure the airport, there's an expectation there's going to be planes, helicopters to landing, taken off. That's normal operations.
Mhm.
The insurance company is viewing this as outside of normal operations of the airport. It's specialized and a higher risk.
Okay,
That's
so all the SFOC approved aerobatic pilots that have low level SFOCs, all they would have to do is provide a copy of insurance to the town.
Naming the town and the county as additional named insured.
Councillor Brown as well.
Yeah, just to that point as well. This is not an unusual request. If people want to skate at the skating rink, they have to do exactly the same thing. And it's not just the town, it's any municipality that has a recreation facility has to go through the same requirements.
Okay, so seeing how we have them right there, then I'll ask the,
I don't even know if it's possible to do that, especially at the level you're putting in. If it is 5 million, I don't know honestly if we can actually obtain that kind of insurance, period. So we've been trying to look into this somewhat. The maximum we've been able to find so far is 3 million.
and would that be through the Aerobatics Association, or would that have to be with the individual pilots?
It's stuff we're still trying to work out.
We're looking at a couple of different things. It's going to take a little bit of time. One is we're going to become an EAA chapter as well as an Aerobatics Canada chapter. EAA do have insurance that we can get for events that would cover all events. And so we're looking into getting that for this, right? It would be similar to the insurance that the guys get from COPA for the fly-in breakfast and for the COPA for kids, which I know is not 5 million either. So they're going to be in a position where they're going to have to get more insurance for those events too, right?
Councillor Brown.
So the question is not really about getting the insurance or providing documentation. It's about the number.
The number is, 5 million is, like I said, as Kyle said, you now have to go into special underwriters and stuff, and that's what the air shows do for like massive events. The other thing that I would comment on is that most of the risk is in takeoff and landing, and in takeoff and landing, the aerobatic airplanes are equal with everybody else. We're no different than any other airplane in takeoff and landing phase as far as the risk to the airport is concerned. The risk during aerobatics is out over a swamp where the chance of hitting a hangar is next to nil.
Yeah, and just as an aside to that too, as a commercial operator per seat, there's no way commercial operators are even carrying that type of that high a number for commercial flight operations.
So, Mr. Kraus, just to sort of bring this back to a focus, perhaps there's an opportunity to have further conversation with our insurance carrier with regard to our new information. Your thoughts on a way to proceed forward that makes the most appropriate sense, Mr. Kraus?
So Madam Chair, I mean, like our insurance company is not going to do the insurance. They're just providing, advising us that we don't have it, and they're recommending what we need to cover us. Now, every lawyer and every insurance company is going to recommend $5 million of liability insurance. So it's going to be a policy decision of this committee of what level of insurance is acceptable to this committee. So if it's 2 million, then I would like that, like in a resolution. So at least it's established. I mean, it goes back to Mr. Petition's lease. You know, his liability insurance was 5 million. That's at the recommendation of the lawyer who drafted the lease agreement. It's really a policy decision of this committee.
Well, and thank you for that clarity. I'm reminded that back in 2019, the lease agreement we named as 2 million was what I believe we have in, and I'm just looking for the correct page for ensuring, there it is, page 140. And if that's sort of the precedent we're setting through that process, maybe that's the appropriate number to keep there as a $2 million insurance. I don't know, perhaps that'll give folks food for thought, because we will need to make a motion to give administration some clarity.
All right,
Mr. Wadden?
so low-level aerobatics will continue with the FSOC until we hear back from the Aerobatics Association and what they can do with insurance, and until it's figured out with this commission then on what the minimum insurance will be.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going with that is we are the group that would provide that guidance. So I guess it's our level of understanding of what we've heard and risk tolerance. And we know what we have from the insurance company. Then we have to then look at what do we expect hangar operators, owners, pilots from whatever level they want to fly at, recognizing that if it's an air show, we expect that high level because there's more risk to public. That's the $5 million one. So is there a different number that we can say, that's the number that we want our administration to aim at? That's the guidance we provide. Councillor Auld.
I don't think we have the technical or legal education to make that determination on what number is appropriate. I can say 2 million, Randy could say 5 million. I don't have no idea what it would cost to properly insure it. I think we have to take the advice of our insurance agencies and our lawyers as far as what that dollar figure is. I don't think we can arbitrarily say it's $1 million. It's enough.
And I appreciate that we don't have that technical experience here other than perhaps Mr. Wadden. Perhaps we can leave it with this working group task force, and they could bring a recommendation back to us as well. It seems the appropriate place to put it. We would have Mr. Lindsay to work with that group and come up with an appropriate positive way forward that makes sense for all parties. Why don't we do that? Would that work for the
So
managing
Madam
partner?
Chair, just to ensure I am understanding correctly, that this board is saying, let's continue with aerobatics without the requirement of proof of insurance at this time. And if that's the case, I would like that in a motion. please.
Okay, Councillor Auld.
That is definitely not what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't believe that's what I'm saying either. I think we need to have proof of insurance. We just don't know what that dollar value is now, but in the meantime, I think that we'd like to have some way for them to continue to do their practices and things. So can they provide what they currently have for proof of insurance with the intent to give us further direction through this task force on what our expectation is of how much liability?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I mean, that would work for administration, but we would still like that in a
Yes.
resolution.
Councillor Brown.
And Madam Chair, just, I know the motion hasn't been drafted yet, but I would like a recorded vote on this as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Councillor Hoven.
I think there needs to be some sort of proof of insurance immediately. We don't want to have that liability. Now, is it 1, 2, or 5 million? I guess I'd be content with saying 2 million right now and then get the research. Maybe Mr. Reed can contact the RMA and see if they have a recommendation for the county's perspective too. And he can forward that information to the task group.
Carrie, sorry to interrupt. So Transport Canada requires that all pilots have $1 million public liability on their airplane insurance. So I can guarantee you that everybody has that for sure. Some people may have higher than that. And that is a law requirement, legal requirement by the cars.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm sure that Mr. Lindsay probably would be able to help us with that as well. Mr. Wadden,
So use the example of something going into a hangar. Do we have a dollar value of a hangar that's more than $1 million at the airport? Use the example that you wanted insurance, proof of insurance in case an aircraft went into a hangar. Do we have a hangar valued at the airport that's worth more than $1 million?
Mr. Kraus.
Well, I'm not the assessor for the county, so I don't know. But liability insurance is more than just the value of a hangar. So.
Okay, so with a little bit of extra information, that the Transport Canada's minimum is $1 million. Some may have more. Councillor Hoven's recommending that we stay at 2 million as a recommendation for the interim. I guess that's what I'm looking to. Can we live with that, Councillor Alt?
In that, it would have to have the town and county as insured.
Additionally
So
insured.
that would have to be in there,
I agree.
not just their
Oh,
personal.
I will say, and I just need to make this clear. I know that you're eager to help us through this. And we've been great, and I know that you want to, and I need to try to limit that. Okay. Thank you, though. So, and I appreciate you want to help us. Do we have a motion that we'd like to create to give that guidance? I guess I look to you, Councillor Hoven. You sort of had that that idea of the 2 million
Chair,
and additionally insured.
Is it possible that they don't know whether they would be able to get $2 million or what the costs are of $2 million? So if we establish something that's unattainable, are we putting them out of business?
I hope not. That is the fear. So we know the minimum is to achieve Transport Canada, it's 1 million. Councillor Ald.
I'm not sure if we need to make it into a separate motion, but would we not need to have all of the requirements fulfilled in this motion? The insurance, the written permission from the airport landowners? Would we not, do we want to do a separate motion for that or have it all wrapped into this as far as for them moving forward?
Would you see that as a bit of a way to wrap it all in, or do you see it as separate discussions? Councillor Hoven.
Good question. Currently, what is required right now, Mr. Kraus, for someone to do the aerobatics?
Currently required right now.
Yes.
So they would need an SFOC, obviously.
And that's already in place.
They would need permission from the airport operator, which previously has been given through past operators or managers. And they would need permission from the adjacent landowner where the aerobatics box is. The town does not have a record of that approval.
Okay.
It's just
And
that
that-
we don't have a copy of it, so, yeah.
At the risk, I've seen a thumbs up from the other side of the room that they can get you a copy.
So going back to aviation insurance, the company that I work for has been dealing with the same aviation insurance broker for years and years and years and years, and it takes months and months to renew insurance and get insurance sorted out. So this is not something that they're going to be able to just phone downtown here and say, hey, I want to add PL and PD and extra liability to my aircraft. This could take months and months and months. So,
Okay, that's.
and this is going to put them out of business.
Okay, that's not the intent here. I don't believe.
Okay,
Councillor
so
Hoven.
I will move that we require 1 million in liability as required by the CARS on the town and the county be added as named insureds. And then all the other things are already in place, correct?
Yeah, so Madam Chair, it's just that we don't
Yes.
have a copy of the adjacent landowner's approval, so we should have that on file since we're authorizing.
Okay.
Okay, so just to follow up to that though, Tim, just to even name the town and the county mutual insured could take months.
I understand that, but I know when vendors go even to the market on Main, the town has to be added as a named insurer. And I think it's just I know it's an inconvenience, and I don't know if everyone on in the aerobatics club is going to be happy, but the town and the county do have liability concerns and a responsibility to the taxpayer to make sure that we're not in a situation where the town, where the ratepayers will be having to pay for it.
Okay,
Well, gosh, I hope they can find fast forward on some of this so we don't inadvertently shut you folks down. Okay. That's a huge dilemma for these folks. Okay, and you said, and copy of the landowner permission.
I don't know if that has to be in the motion. I don't know if that has to be in the motion. It's already requested. I think it just has to be given.
Okay.
Right? Whoever, we need someone to make sure the town gets a copy of that permission.
Counselor Brown?
Yeah, could I get a read back of that motion?
Marina, thank you.
For the benefit of the committee, be it resolved that the airport committee require $1 million insurance as required by CARS and for town and county to be added as mutual insurers.
Okay. Does that reflect what your motion is, Counselor Hovind?
The only thing, if we want to add until we get the
On a temporary basis.
on a temporary basis until the practice policy is brought forward. Or until the aerobatic practice policy is approved.
Okay.
so what's the readback on that now?
Be it resolved that the airport committee require a $1 million insurance as required by CARS and for the town and county to be named as additional insurers until aerobatic policy is approved.
Okay. Counselor Ald.
I guess that kind of answers my question. I was trying to determine how we leave that at, if we leave it at $1 million period, then are we stuck with that moving forward? Or, but that with the policy change that I think they addressed that.
Yeah, it's an interim solution, I believe. Counselor Brown, and then I have a question.
My concern is if we do this now, are we not setting a precedent? If we could set it at $1 million before, what's to stop anybody from arguing, why are we doing for $1 million down the road?
I guess for me, I would like to think that since we're going to have the actual stakeholders reviewing it themselves, the recommendation will be coming from the stakeholders themselves. And my hope is that that's that level of reasonableness that we would be expecting of all parties. Counselor Brown, you look like you might have something more.
No.
Okay. Is there a way that we could create a legal document that the pilots could sign, or does it actually have to be on their insurance?
So Madam Chair, actually, the insurance is the minimum. I mean, our our insurance actually is recommending that we have a contract signed. What do they call it? Agreement in place with third parties and contractually transferring risk and liability. So in addition to that, so administration right now is not recommending that. I mean, because that would take significant time because we need legal to draft it and then be reviewed and so forth.
Okay.
So the insurance is the minimum required. I mean, as we go through the policy with the board, I mean, that could become a question whether the board wants that contract signed.
All right. And thank you for that clarity, because I was like, okay, is there something we can do to assist this interim situation? Counselor Ald?
This question is for both the county and town CAO. Is $1 million, is that adequate? Are you guys comfortable with having that as?
So, Madam Chair, and and I guess maybe to put it in perspective, the minimum the town requires for any organization is $2 million. So minor hockey has to provide proof of $2 million liability insurance to go into the rink. The swim club provides that insurance. 2 million is the minimum that the town accepts.
Okay, and thank you for that clarity. Mr. Reed, the county.
I would echo what Mr. Carlson said.
Okay,
It's a very typical number.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question as the new guy. We aren't requiring any other airplane to show proof of insurance. It's just by the fact that they're licensed. The federal government is taking, right? That's where we get proof that they are insured by their federal.
So our insurance company said, like, running an airport, it's typical use, planes landing, planes, taking off. Low-level aerobatics below 2,000 feet is not a typical use of an airport, and it's not covered under our insurance, and they're deemed it as a higher risk. So we're not covered. So like the town is not covered, or the county's not covered for air shows or aerobatic competitions either. So when those occur, we also require insurance for the event.
So
okay.
with that comment, would we be able to amend that motion back to the $2 million?
Counselor Hoven.
I guess I would accept that amendment.
All right, any other questions or comments? Oh, Counselor.
Just
Brown.
one last readback, please.
Yeah, good idea.
Be it resolved that the airport committee require a $2 million insurance as required by CARS and for town and county to be named as additional insurers until aerobatic policy is approved.
We have to remove the required by CARS because CARS only requires 1 million. And this would be, I guess, per the town and county policy or practice.
I will tell you, I'm very torn with this. It feels like we're being asked to pick a no-win situation and vote on it. And I'm struggling internally about how do I even vote on this? Because I want us to have our users to be able to continue on and use it safely. And personally, I'm like, if I vote for this, I'm forcing some users who may not be able to do this in a timely fashion because of the insurance companies they're working with being inordinately slow. And if I vote against it, I stop it anyway. I feel like I'm caught in a bad situation. It's a no-win.
So is there a
Mr.
30-day grace period on this then, or insurance takes time, so.
We also as counselors, we're asked to be the stewards of the public liability, the public purse. And that $2 million is a number of practice. It isn't new to us. I recognize it's something that's not done regularly for the aviation. That's what I've heard. This is just a really no-win motion for all of us here today. I'm struggling. Are we comfortable with 30 days grace when we know? Because we know now. We can't say we don't know. You can't unknow it. I almost wish I didn't know, but we do. And we have to act appropriately. Councillor Hoven, I see your lights on.
Oh, no.
Lord, I was hoping you had something to say. I'm sure I'm not the only councillor here who feels like that. And I'm quite confident, Mr. Wadden, you feel that same internal pull. How do we vote on this? It's a no-win no matter what we do. And maybe I'm being too graphic, but that's what this feels like at this moment for at least me. And I sense I'm not the only one. Okay. So we have a motion. I guess we're going to vote on it. No other questions? Those in, go ahead. One
I would
last
like to
thought.
add effective August 1st, 2021. Everyone currently has $1 million in liability. And that would give 24, I forgot what day it is, 23 days to hopefully get this requirement fulfilled.
How comfortable are you with 23 days of risk? Counselor All,
In the next, so between now and August 1st, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 weekends of practice. They can be out there practicing. That's a month worth of holidays that there's their 30 days that we just said we're not comfortable with.
That's a minimum.
I think we have to look at the track record over the last 20 years.
that's where I was gonna go next. We haven't seen any events that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with that.
So Counselor Hoven, your amendment to effective August 1st, that's where what your amendment is to this motion.
Yes.
Could we please have it read back? We're trying to work through a difficult situation.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Be it resolved that the Airport Committee require a $2 million insurance as per town and county practice, effective as of August 1st, 2021, and for town and county to be named as additional insurance until aerobatic policy is approved.
And Counselor Brown asked for a recorded vote as well earlier. Any other questions?
Madam
So-
Chair, just
oh,
for
yes.
clarification of administration, so that would, just reading that, so that they would not have to submit any proof of insurance until August 1st?
Any proof of insurance?
Yes,
Or just?
I'm just trying to-
The town and the county is,
additional named insured.
I think that needs to be done immediately. It's the giving people the 23 days to talk to their insurance company and get up to 2 million. That is my intent.
Okay.
Are you comfortable with that wording, or would you like to change to make it more clear?
We will get this done.
We don't want gray areas.
Be it resolved that the Airport Committee require a $2 million insurance as per town and county practice, effective as of August 1st, 2021, and for town and county to be named as additional insurers until aerobatic policy is approved.
Sure. Not insured.
Is that what you're looking for,
I'm good with
Counselor
that
Hoven?
motion.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, those in favor? Counselor Hoven, Reeve Laird, those opposed? Counselor Brown, Counselor Ald, Mr. Wadden, that's opposed, it is defeated. Okay. Have we got a different way forward? Counselor Ald,
I would make that same motion without the extension.
okay, perhaps we can get that clarified and read back.
Madam Chair, the second resolution reads, be it resolved that the Airport Committee require a $2 million insurance as per town and county practice, and for town and county to be named as additional insured until aerobatic policy is approved.
Okay, I assume you would like this recorded again,
Yes, please, yes.
so to be recorded. Okay, so it's everything, just not that date. Okay, any other questions or comments? Those in favor? Okay, I'm just making sure. Counselor Hoven, Counselor Brown, Counselor Ald. Those opposed? Reeve Laird and Mr. Wadden. It is carried. Okay, so we've got a way forward. I hope we can achieve some timelines and that your insurance companies find a higher gear. All right, working our way through this process, we've dealt with some insurance questions to try to keep our user groups using and functioning in the airport to the highest safety possible. And now we need to look at this policy. It's a draft policy. I'll call it a straw dog for anybody who's listening, because that's all its intent is. It's an opportunity to build on that. Are we comfortable with any of these resolutions, including the Rocky Flying Club and the Alberta Aerobatics Club to be stakeholders engaged with our supervisor to work through this process? Which resolution would you like to go for? We have some options on page 119. I would suggest that when we form this task force, that whoever is working on these groups from either group would have a person and their alternate. I don't know if it's good to have two from each. That might give just a little bit more horsepower in the room. That might be valuable as well. And that way, if there's any sort of personality stalemates, we would then have 4 people and our airport supervisor working towards quick resolution, because we need to get this solved quickly. Would you be willing to look at 2 from each of the stakeholder groups we've named and our supervisor instead of just 1? That's my recommendation. Councillor Brown.
My preference would be 1, just for the fact that it's going to be less discussion in terms of less back and forth about opinions and whatnot. I think 1 is sufficient.
Other thoughts on 1 or 2 from each user group?
Yeah,
Mr. Wadden?
I think 2 from each would make more sense.
I'm just looking for,
That's still a pretty small group.
I think so, to the managing partner, Mr. Kraus, is 2 still from each group still manageable?
Madam Chair, yes, I mean, it is. I mean, we'll work with whatever the board establishes.
Right. Okay, so other thoughts, 1 or 2? 2? 1, you
I
said.
can live with that.
You can live with 2? Okay, so let's make that friendly amendment to this, that we're 2. And how would we look at that motion as perhaps, Marina, you've got one that makes most sense for us, recognizing we're coming up on noon and this might be as far as we get today.
And this would be motion just for clarification for the airport lease procedures. Is that correct? Item 6.2?
Yes, no, we're on 6.1, the
Okay.
aeronautic practice policy.
So we're doing a 3rd resolution of 6.1.
Yes, thank you.
What I have here, Madam Chair, is be it resolved that the airport committee direct administration to work with a task force represented by 2 members of each group to present a low-level aerobatic practice policy.
All right. I I think that makes sense. Who would like to make that motion? Thank you, Counselor Brown. And that's 2 times for the task force. Any other questions? Seeing none, those in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Look at, I even said the word properly. I'm very proud of myself. All right, we are at noon. This has been a full morning. We've had some very thorough discussions with our delegations. We are then up to airport lease procedures. In 6.2, 6.3 is the fuel flow fee. I'm going to look, and then we've got 7.1 through 5 and on through to item number 10. So we've got maybe halfway through this agenda. Is there anything that is time sensitive here, Mr. Kraus, that we would need to look at today that would be beneficial for, I know that the more we can get done, the more Mr. Lindsay has to work with, but this is about as far as we've got time for today.
Madam Chair, no, I don't think there's anything time sensitive. It's all procedures that the board has asked us to bring back for review. But in saying that, Councillor Hoven did add 2 to the agenda, so I would ask him if his 2 items are time sensitive.
The only thing about the noise complaints, I was just wondering, Mr. Reed could deal with a lot of that administratively, I think, with the noise complaint between administration.
I think so. And my understanding is when we're getting these complaints from the little I know about this is the airspace is managed by Transport Canada. And there's some numbers, you could probably, a 1-800 number, probably. I know I could probably look to the end of the room to get that number easily. But they could just, maybe we could advertise that or put it on our website that says for complaints, you contact Transport Canada at whatever the number is, because they look after the airspace, I believe, and airplanes and things that happen. Mr. Wadden?
Yeah, I think something that we have to deal with here right now is 9-1.
Oh, okay.
For the request for permission for the aerobatics competition, that can't wait for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Good eye. Now I looked through my package and maybe I just didn't see it. And what page would we look at? Or that it's September long weekend is my understanding. So we just need a motion to support that competition. And that would come with its own level of extra insured and all of that extra work and we need to get that done then.
Again, I can say one thing, it took us over 3 months to get the quote for insurance for this year, and it was for 1 million. So if we have to go to 2, I need to do it tomorrow or today.
Well,
Because it was 3 months to get a quote
okay.
for the contest insurance.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I would gladly make the motion that we support the request.
Okay, support the request. Any other questions or comments? All right, those in favor? That is carried unanimously. So that is completed. And the air tour, the correspondence on 10.1 and is really just to remind everybody that that's going on this weekend and that we've got an invite. And I believe Councillor Ald, Mayor Burke had indicated that it's yourself maybe that might be doing greetings or not. Okay, well, the town may have to.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Mayor brought it up to me at our meeting the other day. I'm not.
Oh, I apologize. Well, the town will assign somebody or figure out.
So Madam Chair, for clarification, the mayor will be in attendance.
Oh, okay, even better. So the mayor and Reeve plan to attend to bring greetings from our 2 municipalities.
And that's really all that one was about. So I think that covers the air tour. And the rest, I think we'll just have to wait and be tabled to the next meeting.
Yep, so Madam Chair, so then that'd just be a resolution, I mean, to recess this meeting and the board could pick a date.
Okay. So what date would we like to look at? We'll quickly do that, recognizing some folks have got their appointments. It sounds like sooner the better.
Sometime in the last week of July. Yeah. Works for me.
How would the 28th of July work?
I'm having an issue with my app. There we go. I'm not available on the 28th. I've got MPC all day.
Ooh, that won't work. 29th. It's a Thursday.
I'm free.
29th. Mr. Wadden?
Yeah, we'll try that.
Okay, so we're going to recess the meeting to July the 29th at 9 o'clock, same time, same station. I need a motion to that effect. Okay, Councillor Auld, those in favor? All right, we'll look forward to that meeting invite. Thank you, Marina. We know that you're on top of that. And we'll go from there. I'm looking at as 12, what have I got? 12:08. I'm going to recess this motion or recess this meeting. All right.
Thank you, Chair.